Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this special meeting of Fernie City Council on February 21st, 2024, held at 6:30 p.m. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the city of Fernie is located within Kukinamakis, the unceded territory of the Yakutat Nucleate. We recognize that we live and work in their vast lands. Akanahunik are from Yakutat Nucleate and are members of the Tanaha-speaking peoples of British Columbia, Idaho, and Montana. With that, I'll call the meeting to order and ask for the approval of the agenda, a mover and a seconder to adopt the agenda of the special meeting for February 21st. Moved by Councillor Adi Kelly, seconded by Councillor Ramadas. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Sorry, it was a bit cheeky. Thank you for your sense of humor. And I'll just make this note that public participation period is not scheduled during special meetings. However, we want to confirm that council must undertake a process of public consultation regarding the proposed financial plan before it's adopted. There will be no public participation period during tonight's meeting. There will be a public consultation opportunities, including the open house session scheduled for February 29th here in this room at the Fernie Senior Center, and through Let's Talk Fernie. And now we'll get right down to business with a report from our Director of Finance, Mr. Burdett.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. Good evening, Council. Just share my screen. Tonight is our second meeting in the 2024 financial plan process. Agenda for this evening. The point of tonight is to go over our revenue and expenses in our operating budget in more detail. We'll also get into reserve balances and our capital plans. Lastly, we'll close with a bit of a recap and an agenda for tomorrow night's scheduled meeting. And while I'm on the topic of tomorrow night's meeting, I'd like to briefly discuss the agenda for that, which is really up to council. I want to remind council that tomorrow night's meeting is an additional meeting in this year's budget process. And at the conclusion of tonight's meeting, there'll be a few options available to council. It's possible that tonight will go late. This is slide 3 of 81 in tonight's presentation. And, we may get to slide 50 and it'll be 10 p.m. And at that point, I'd just really like to leave the option open for council to call it a night and continue tomorrow night if people are getting tired. It's also possible that council will ask questions that require a little more investigation from staff in order to prepare the most thorough and accurate answer, in which case we can bring those back tomorrow. Tomorrow night is also slated to go into more detail about varying service levels, or if council would like to explore adjusting any of those and their impact on taxation and level of service to the community. And then another option is maybe we get to the end of tonight's presentation and there really aren't that many outstanding questions or items to discuss, or maybe there's one or two and it's not really worth the time to set up and take down this room tomorrow night. So another option is that we can defer tomorrow night's meeting as an additional item on next Tuesday's regular meeting of council. I think Mr. McConnell would agree that it's so far a fairly light agenda next Tuesday, and so it might just be a better use of our time to add tomorrow night's meeting to February 27th. For tonight, I want to just remind viewers and council that the council strategic plan was recently adopted in December, and I just want to briefly go through how it's kind of shaped this year's budget cycle in the last month and a half since that was adopted. The strategic plan provides top level of direction on vision, mission, and values, and the objectives and goals council wishes to prioritize. We'll review those elements briefly and through the presentations discuss how they have informed the projects being proposed with this budget, and also how the existing critical infrastructure projects are consuming significant capacity for net new initiatives. This slide here has the values from Council's strategic plan, which I just want to leave up for a few seconds for anyone watching to read and absorb. And finally, the three main objectives of Council's strategic plan: quality services, livable community, and organizational excellence, which I remind Council as a slide from last week's budget meeting. The senior leadership team had a few working group sessions where we assigned capital and operating projects under each of the strategies that help achieve Council's three main objectives. Each of these stickies you see in this photo represent a significant amount of time, many of which will be discussed in more detail tonight in the individual departments' major project slides. Firstly, though, I'd like to go through our operating budget. How much revenue does the city bring in and where does it go? This slide here breaks out the sources of city's revenue. The split here is mostly consistent with prior years, so there's no real change of note to discuss here. Unsurprisingly, over half of our revenue comes from our local residents, local businesses, and then the mines sharing tax. You can see at the bottom there, our total revenue for 2024 is projected to be just under 25 million. And for reference, 2023 was just over 22 million. This slide has a little more detail on revenue. There's a few increases here, namely new construction of in the amount of 147,000, which at this time is still an estimate that we receive from BC Assessment. Excuse me, but it's usually a fairly close estimate. There's also an additional $99,000 in mine sharing revenue compared to last year. It's worth noting in the property tax row that it's largely unchanged apart from that non-market construction because we haven't applied any potential tax increase to that number yet. This slide breaks down our permits and licenses revenue. The most notable line here should be in building and plumbing permits. These permits prior to 2023 were consistently over budget every year with no real hint of slowing down. And after discussion this year with the director and manager of planning, they're expecting similar numbers this year, noting that there are some larger projects that were expected in 2023 that ended up delayed until this coming year, 2024.
Councillor Hamilton, sorry, Mr. Burnett.
Thank you. I didn't mean to cut you off mid-sentence there. The other number that jumped out at me when I was looking at this was the business licenses, that's up 33% roughly, and just curious if there's some background information on that.
Sure, thanks for that, Councillor Hamilton. That number actually has changed from last week, and if you'll remember, Councillor Shoesmith had a question about that row, and also the second row from the bottom, the business license intercommunity fee. The actuals there was higher than the budget of zero, and that's because Sparwood runs that program. So any money we collect through that program goes to Sparwood. So I've adjusted the actuals in that row. And then also the business licenses row has gone up, as you said, by quite a bit. And the reason for that, there's two reasons. One is there's more businesses in town, but also the new Granicus software, which is helping us track, I don't know if short-term rentals. Yeah, I want to say illegal, but I don't know if that's the right word.
Well, it helps us track all short-term rentals.
Right.
Legal or otherwise.
Right. So then that's brought in additional business license revenue. So that amount's gone up since last week, about 21,000 actually. And at this point, I guess I'll note that many of our budget numbers are still an estimate because of many reasons, such as other provincial organizations are still finalizing their own budgets. And like any further changes between now and our March 19th budget meeting will be collected and shared with council. Though I do anticipate any changes at this point to be small ones.
Sorry, Mr. Burdett, we had talked, or we have talked at this table on a number of occasions. It's come up about a services, I can't remember the fees and services bylaw review, like a review of our fees and charges across the board. Do we have a sense of where that's at and how that, you know, given that, how it would potentially affect the budget in 2024 or 2025?
Sure. Thanks for that, Mayor Milligan. We have a few of those bylaws. One is our Parks and Recs user-fee bylaw, which council just approved the changes to. So those increases have been included in this year's budget. And then there's also, actually, Director Lennox will be talking about his development fees bylaw later on in this presentation. And then we also have like our DCC and ACC fees, which is a project on the list of my work plan and Director Lennox's work plan and Director Hausler's work plan. So they're all targeted to have a review in the next year or two, and then our budget will be adjusted accordingly, depending on the time of year that we do these things.
Thank you.
A couple of slides now on investment revenue. We're quite limited with what we can and can't do just in terms of risk. Obviously, we don't want to be investing municipal funds in anything too volatile. So this slide is just a snip from section 183 of the community charter, which details what our options are. Most of the city of Fernie's money is kept with the MFA and also our regular bank. But with interest rates doing what they have been doing, there are some really good options at other major banks or even local credit unions. I have spoken to other organizations that have platforms that make it easy for municipalities to shop around, in that they have a portal you can log on to and then put in how much money you have to invest and for how long, and then all of the various vendors have a day or two to return rates to you. And so, I mean, that's an extremely useful option. But I do want to align these options with an official council approved investment policy, which we don't currently have. It was on Finance's work plan last year, but unfortunately battled through some significant health issues and leaves, and it remains on Finance's work plan for 2024, albeit very high on the list. That said, with current market interest rates, we did manage to earn approximately 5.5% on our holdings this year, which is extremely good for municipal funds using the options we're allowed to use. And it is an active part of my week, just attentive cash management and making sure that we have enough to pay our short-term bills, and what we can put away, we do, just to earn as much as possible. And that's it for revenue. So I just wanted to pause here and see if there's any questions so far. And if not, I will.
Councilor McIsaac.
Okay. Thank you, Worship. A little button challenge today. Just a question with regards to investment, and that is that are we limited also in the time frame of investment? Meaning, like, are we limited to 1 year type investment in order to ensure that we have cash available, or do we do longer term based investment where it's, you know, over the case of 5 years or 20 years or something of that nature?
Thank you, Councillor McIsaac. There's no limit. The MFA, for example, has 5 or 6 different funds that we can choose to invest in, one of which is designed to not be able to take your funds out for 10 years. And that's more of like a mortgage-based security that they offer. So, you know, if you have that much in the bank and you can be sure that you don't need it for 10 years, and that's definitely an option. And that sort of thing is discussed in a council-approved investment strategy. But the city of Fernie currently doesn't have any money in that particular product. Yeah.
Councilor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. Director, just wondering, like, you don't have to really start from ground up, do you? The investment plan, can you not just rip off and duplicate from some other municipality?
Yes, totally. It should be fairly quick to tailor it to our own needs. Absolutely. I like to use the term borrow though, instead of rip off. Build from, yeah.
Councillor Nixon?
Thank you, Worship. I'm just curious if we have any, we participate in the traffic fine revenue sharing transfers. Do we get anything from that? Is it just under miscellaneous in the budget?
Thank you, Councillor Nixon. We do participate in that. And our share in 2024 is going to be around 29,000. You're welcome. Okay, if that's it for revenue, I will move on to expenses. Expenses in general have gone up by around 7% this year, noting they went up by 14.7% last year. And with a full staffing complement in 2023, we have focused on cost-saving measures and efficiencies. We did touch base on those a bit last week, but some examples that we talked about are, savings of 95,000 in external contracts in the streets department and savings of 40,000 in fire department all-call policy changes. There will be a board listing more of these at the open house next week for anyone that's interested to read that. And that will continue to be the focus of city staff going forward is identifying these efficiencies and getting better at what we do with our full staff.
Councillor Ramadas? Sorry, Mr. Burnett.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just a thought there. I just feel like that is a success story. I think we should be celebrating that. And at the open house, if like my suggestion would be to bring that up front and center, because often people aren't aware of some of these work that has been done in the background. We just need to bring it up and highlight.
Oh, I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
I think Mr. Burdett would agree. Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm wondering if Mr. Burdick could maybe talk a little bit about the relationship between the tax increase and the expense increase. There's a big gap between what the tax rate increase was last year and what the actual expense rate was. And I'm just wondering what the impact it was on the budget and what has that left us in the position of. And more specifically, what I want to know is how direct is that relationship? Is it literally 1-to-1? If it's 14.7 minus 5.9, does it mean we lost ground of 8.9% kind of thing?
Thank you, Councillor McIsaac. So last year, as I said, expenses went up 14.7, tax rate went up by 6.8. So we were able to, recoup some of those expenses by additional investment revenue was a big one. The mine tax sharing agreement last year went up by a lot. So yeah, and also increased user fees from most of our facilities coming back to post-COVID operations. So it all helps offset a little bit. Yeah, and I mean, that's obviously a risk if our expenses go up 15%, but we don't recoup any extra revenue, then you're looking at a 15% tax increase. But that hasn't been the case so far, obviously.
Yeah, please.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that answered my question. And at the very end, when you said that it would take a 15% tax increase, so it really is, for all intents and purposes in the discussion, the tax increase, the shortfall is going to be the difference between the increase of expenses and the increase of taxes. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Apologize. I did have another point I wanted to say, but I can't. Thank you. This slide is a listing of our major expense categories.
Sorry, Mr. Burdett.
Yep.
Councillor Ramadas.
Thanks, Your Worship. I was just thinking to Councillor McIsaac's point here, like this delta between expenses and revenue is often a piece of the puzzle that lots of us kind of don't understand very well. I don't know, again, like I'm emphasizing more on the communication piece with the citizens. So some way to kind of simplify this in those open house slides would be much appreciated. And mill rate as well, not to forget mill rate.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll put some thought into it. And actually what I was going to say is, expenses have gone up 7%, but CPI, BC CPI this year was 3.4, which includes all goods, 3.9 excluding food. So we buy goods that are way outside of normal CPI numbers on average. And, I guess, yeah, there's no real good news to that, but it is a risk and it's not sustainable to the average municipal taxpayer if this continues for another 10 years or whatever. Yeah. Okay, this slide is a listing of our major expense categories. Biggest increase here is salaries and benefits. Salaries for two reasons. One is our contractual obligations with our three wage agreements. And the other is the pool coming back online to 7 days a week following post-COVID. Another big increase here is our benefits. That's for one, because of salaries, but also for two, our extended health benefits premiums, the percentage is quite a bit higher this year. And I don't really have any insight as to why that is. I expect people are just using those services more. This slide is our legislative services department. There's a decrease from last year because last year being council's first year, we did have some expenses set aside for strategic planning. And then the note at the bottom just provides a bit of detail on how the council remuneration works. It's based on provincial CPI, which, as I said earlier, is 3.4% this year. Or in 2023, excuse me. This is admin services, an increase here, which you already would have seen in the salaries and benefits line. Again, it's our exempt compensation policy, and it's phasing exempt compensation towards market median as per the policy. Asset management, which includes our director of asset management, our GIS technician, and business analyst. It does look like a significant increase here, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that we used to split our technology costs between departments, but now are just choosing to keep them all in this department because this is the department that does most of those purchases and makes those decisions. There's also the Elk Valley Economic Initiative here for just under 24,000, which is a new shared initiative between the Regional District of East Kootenay, Sparwood, and Elkford. And so that amount there is Fernie's share as per that agreement. There's also an optional 47,000 here for an additional service from our managed services provider, which their name is Trinus. And so cybersecurity upgrades are key requirements of the city's as the city prioritizes towards business modernization. It's important that the city continues to expand the use of digital platforms and tools, that we also invest in cybersecurity practices to protect our devices, data, and confidential information from cyber attacks. These cybersecurity upgrades include licensing that support a managed security operations center and password management. These upgrades are vital for safeguarding the city's digital assets and are a stepping stone in the city's journey to protecting our data. Trinus Technologies, who's our managed services provider, has recommended these upgrades as part of our IT roadmap. And so this additional service in 2024 is valued at 47,000, but note that's only for 8 months, starting in May. A full year next year would be just over 70,000.
Sorry, just on the previous slide, you don't have to go back, but the Elk Valley Economic Initiative, in your meeting with RDK last week, did you have any insights as to where that's at? And whether it's progressing or not.
Thanks, Mayor Milligan. I may come back to that question in a couple
Sure.
of minutes, if that's
Yeah,
okay. just while we
no
do some
panic.
research.
As Councillor McIsaac says, we have all night.
Okay, I will come back to that.
Okay, thank you.
This slide is for development services, or in other words, planning, building, inspection, and bylaw. There is some increased expenses this year because of an extra 0.5 full-time equivalent planner, which I did mention earlier, and will still be discussed later by our Director of Planning when he presents his slides.
Councillor Hamilton.
Sorry, I did have a question about the IT and cybersecurity slide there. And I'm curious how comprehensive this package is at this price point, and kind of what, I mean, without getting into line by line detail, like is it just, I'm not even sure how to phrase my question, which is why I was delayed in asking it, but can you just go over, I guess, what a little bit again, what's involved in that, please?
Sure. So this dedicated resource from Trinus will be helping us advance some of our critical IT projects, you know, such as, let me bring up my spreadsheet here. So they're going to help with the implementation of key IT projects. For example, our website next year is one, and that, you know, they do a lot of the work making sure that our website needs are aligned with, you know, our internet service provider, and then like our other providers like VATM, which is our operating service provider, and also the program that engineering uses, which is called, thank you, SCADA. And so they just make sure all these systems talk to each other and work with each other before implementation, so that our staff isn't spending their time doing this and slowing these projects down and potentially making them cost more. I can bring a little more detail as to what exactly they'll be doing. I just have to run that by our asset management professional who's not here tonight. But,
thank you.
Councillor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. In that $478,000 bucket, what were the big items there, Director? Sorry, I don't have my binder here, so wish I knew the answer. The previous one, 403,734, like just briefly, what are those items in there?
Thank you, Councillor Ramirez. I will have to research that one a bit more and also bring that back to you to get in line by line detail as to what we get for that. Yeah. Okay. And for that, I do have a detailed list of what makes that up that number. I just don't have it on my screen, so I will grab it at some point. Okay, the next slide is our protective services for RCMP. Our budget in 2024 is based on 100% of contract. The actual value does depend on the actual staffing of RCMP positions, which historically we have not had a full complement. but mostly have since 2022. And so historically, that difference between actuals and budget has been used to fund our financial stability operating reserve. But because they are at a full complement, we don't have that, or we're not expected to have that option available to put a little money into the financial stability operating reserve, which, as we'll see in our contribution to reserve slide later, is budgeted to be lower, that contribution to that reserve than prior years. This is our fire department. Again, the main increase here is in salaries and benefits due to contractual obligations. Facilities, parks and recreation. Our revenue is back to pre-pandemic levels, which is a good thing, which explains the increase there from last year's budget. This does mean we require more staff to generate that revenue. So pool staffing is also back to pre-pandemic levels because it's open 7 days a week. Obviously, of note is that we don't generate a one-to-one increase in revenues and expenses, but it does help offset that additional costs of operating the pool full-time. This slide highlights facilities owned by the city of Fernie where services are provided, either in the case of the Chamber of Commerce through a partnership agreement. In that case, it's delivering visitor services, or our other facilities through annual funding contributions, which have traditionally been called grants. It's kind of there's a lot of numbers on that slide, so I will leave it there for a bit. And speaking of our community partners,
Councilor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. I was with these different community support their director. One thing that I actually noted was some of the insurance costs. There's a big difference between actual versus what was estimated in the previous years. In certain areas, they were higher, in certain areas way lower. So what's the confidence here that those numbers will be right for 2024?
Thank you, Councilor Ramirez. Confidence is actually quite high. So the way that particular category works is we get an invoice once a year for our property insurance, and then when we pay that, it just goes into one account, which is in the, it'll come on a later slide. I just don't want to quote it wrong. And then there's a year-end allocation that I do, which I did try to estimate most of those allocations as I was preparing this presentation, but that is one that hasn't been done yet. So there's, I mean, that invoice alone is just under 300,000, and then that gets allocated to all the various buildings. So that's why they appear much lower than budget, but yeah. It's just an unfortunate timing with our year end not being due till May, and so there's still work being done on that part of it.
You just turned your microphone off, sorry.
Any opportunity for volume discount there?
Thanks. I mean, so the only real option we have for that is our insurance renews every year in January, and then there's a few providers of municipal insurance that we shop around for, and then we really just take the best rate. So yes, but however, I would say there's already a significant volume discount included in those rates, yeah.
Because it's one supplier for all our buildings, essentially.
Yeah, one supplier for our property insurance, and then one supplier for our fleet insurance. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
So then this slide is with respect to our 5 community partners, which you can see listed at the bottom there. These past couple of years have seen flat levels of funding to these partners, and I wanted to provide a slide here just exploring the effect of adding some sort of inflationary increase to these partners. As you can see, every 1% increase to their annual funding would results in roughly a 1/20% increase for Fernie taxpayers, or in other words, if we were to increase their funding by 3%, that would result in just over $4 per year increase for the average single-family household in Fernie. And then there was also a question, I believe it was last week, and I believe it was from Councillor Nixon, regarding the level of support we provide our 5 community partners. And I have been able to, at the bottom there, put together some rough estimates on this slide, how much our operating grant makes up their total revenue for the year. So you can see there's a big, it's quite different between the 5 of them. This slide and the next just touch a little bit on our facilities revenue and maintenance. Of note, again, here is the increased expense at the pool for opening 7 days a week. And most of these facilities, as you can see, operate at a fairly significant deficit. We do not recoup the amount of cost it takes to operate these, with the exception of the courthouse, because that whole building is rented out to the province. And then here's another slide which has 4 additional buildings or 4 additional properties that we run.
Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Worship. Just thinking about the previous slide with the courthouse, the difference between the operational expense and the revenue is not super great. Does that actually make up the difference for like long-term, like asset management costs, like the total cost of owning that building over the long term, like including, like I think I have a vague recollection of the last time this roof was done, and I suspect that was a non-trivial expense. So I'm just wondering if that comes even close to matching what our expected sort of asset management cost is for that building.
Sorry, I can shed some light on that. So it most definitely does not take into account the cost of maintaining that building for its life cycle. So part of the work that I'm hoping to do this year is to create 5-year capital plans for all facilities that'll show the amount of investment that's required in 5-10 years to come. Another thing to note on the operating expenses compared to revenue is that the lease agreement or the model of how that facilities ran has the city doing much less than in other facilities. So staff time, resources, parts, materials are reduced when we operate the courthouse, because a lot of that's put back on the leasee because they are the main tenant, and because of that they have more responsibilities, snow removal, life safety inspections, those types of things.
Sorry, before you go back, Mr. Logan, so in those 5-year plans, the 5-year capital plans for the buildings, we'll work, particularly for those occupied by our community partners, we'll work with them to help them presumably get grants in support of that, of same, because historically, you know, the example I always point to, because I was there, is the museum, you know, got, I think, more than 300,000 worth of grants into that building. And so it'd be prudent to work with them because they have access to grant money we don't have to support building maintenance or maintaining the buildings overall.
Most of the community partners that are in lease facilities are pretty good about hunting for grants and are aware of the assets that require attention. From a maintenance point of view, it's really easy to determine which ones are ready to fail or are at risk for failure. I'm hoping the work this year in, you know, rolling back the tape and seeing what's been done since those 2013 facility master plans were completed, we can get a better feel for the state of our facilities infrastructure. But yeah, you're right. The community partners do have a role to play, and they can unlock a lot of funding and have a vested interest in improving all those facilities.
Thank you. Sorry, Councilor McIsaac, do you have a question?
Not so much a question, Your Worship, but just a comment following the information from Director Logan there, and that is, well, I'm not sure if it's really necessary to have the full 5-year capital plans for all the buildings during this particular budget process. At some point, I think it would be very useful as we look at the total cost of owning those facilities and then how they are being used and what income is being earned and how that's going to impact those community partners that occupy them as well as ourselves and so on. I think that's some very useful information as we consider what should happen to those buildings and what should be available for those community partners in the long term. So I'm not sure if it needs to be like at this meeting, but it's the kind of thing I'd like to see, well, not in the far too distant future as we're considering what these costs are.
Yeah, agreed.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Logan. It's going to be a long night, Mr. Burgess.
Well, yeah, just for reference though, we're on slide 28 of 81 now, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're sailing.
Yeah. I wanted to go back to this slide and just make another point of clarity. The budget as it is right now does not have any sort of increase for the community partners. This is just presenting an option. Thank you. And then this slide has community center, arts council, cemetery, and senior center, all of which are fairly steady. And the actuals here for some of these are a little lower because of the Councillor Ramadas's insurance question earlier. There's some allocations that haven't been done to these facilities. This is a breakdown of our engineering and public works department. Again, most increases are due to contractual obligations. I would like to point out an operations facility, a large portion of these costs do get allocated out to various departments, for things such as insurance. And again, when I was preparing these slides, I just hadn't completed this particular allocation yet. It's a year-end journal entry, but again, that's why the actuals here appear so huge.
Thank you. Yeah. Oh, sorry, Councillor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'll try to ask this question. I'm not sure how I will frame this, but or maybe this has been answered in the previous session also. In the memo itself, you had actually called out the asset management, reserve contributions, and service level. What is it called?
Review.
Higher service level, right? Like.
Okay. Yeah.
Is there any opportunity to kind of accelerate some of the road works and maybe go back to normal service level for other assets? You know what I mean? Like the reason I'm asking this is because I remember seeing from one of the binders that we used to have for roads and active transportation network, where it said that roads need the most amount of capital in the next 5 years compared to the other assets. The second thing is also in our community satisfaction survey, there was a big emphasis from the citizens about the need to get better roads and sidewalks. So in light of that, is there any opportunity to kind of focus more on road and sidewalks and maybe just go back to your baseline maintenance on other assets? Does that make sense? I'm sorry, I'm just being long-winded here.
Through to council, just to give some clarity on the question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
You're looking to pull from reduce some service levels and increase that on capital investment on roads?
What would happen if we did that is my question, yes.
I think that might be more of a reserve balance type question.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's good to talk about this now. We're wrapping up the pavement condition assessment project, which was a 2023 project. The final report is in review by staff right now. So that'll also help guide where we should put our money, like where the best bang for our buck is, considering traffic volumes and other elements like that. That type of a document in the future will be rolled into like a revision of the IICP. And then, yeah, and one thing I wanted to note about the IICP, keep in mind with the IICP, that didn't really capture the issue out at the lagoons that well. So there's a big bill out there coming our way that hasn't really been captured in that document. And as we kind of move through a couple projects, I'll get into my slides, like at some point we'll hit a point where it'll be good to review the IICP, tick off the things that we've completed and bring in these supporting documents to just make it even beefier and more informative and like advise our capital investment over the next 5-10 years. As far as can we do more roads work by skimming off the top of other projects? Yes, but be careful where you're going to skim from would be my caution. When we get into our water and sewer discussions, there's some big stuff happening. I'm not
Yeah.
sure if that helps.
Well, it does from my perspective, and I appreciate the question, but to your point, Mr. Heisler, it's a delicate balancing act, right? We don't want to rob Peter to pay Paul and end up with a shortfall somewhere and a catastrophic failure of something. So we have to be very cautious when we move those funds around. But I appreciate the question because you're right. And we likely need to do a bit of a side-by-side comparison, what the community survey told us and where we're allocating our funds, and is there an opportunity to move some funding around to adjust service levels according. Mr. Bornowski?
To Councillor Ramadas's comment and questions, I think Mr. Hausler will speak a little bit to some of the proactive design that unlocks provincial funding or other funding sources to further invest in those projects rather than further depleting the reserves. I would just caution that the Streets Reserve was significantly used last year to advance the project, which came in far above the original bid. And so you are already significantly over investing compared to what was originally projected at the expense of that reserve, which is a fine decision. But then also caution that we are currently, because of the large debt payment, underfunding our annual reserve contributions compared to the recommended levels. So it is a delicate balancing act, and we'll continue to provide more information for you as we move forward.
Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just curious, what are the recommended numbers for the reserves? Like, I mean,
and so there was a asset management investment plan study done in 2018, which may be the report Councillor Ramadas was referring to when he spoke to levels. And there is that explains the math behind the contributions, the recommended contributions to all of our reserves, which, as I've mentioned several times, we're below those recommended levels. And so, you can change the amount to put more into streets if you wanted to invest more into streets, but then you're reducing from another reserve or increasing tax to do that. And then so the risk of reducing another reserve is the assets that reserve was meant to fund will fall behind. And
further?
To be clear, Your Worship, the community survey, absolutely, we'll have to, look at that and as well as make our decisions for this year. But also, I was referring to the IICP itself.
Right.
I recall that, roads were like way behind compared to the other ones.
Yeah.
So it's all coming together now. And I wanted to ask the question, like, how we want to balance this.
No, I appreciate the question.
Yeah.
Councillor Nixon.
thank you, Your Worship. So just exactly what type of percentage of tax increase would we be looking at in order to top up our reserves to what the recommended amount is? Do you have that off the top of your head or no? Not really.
no, not off the top of my head, but I'll make a note. I do have that report accessible and can quickly do the math. So if I can do that by the end of tonight, I will do. If not, I can bring it back.
Sorry, just so I understand your question, Councillor Nixon, that's if we were to choose to do that in 2024. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
It's because we are constantly told that we're below.
Mhm.
And I just want to know what that number.
No, I
is.
think that's a fair
Yeah.
question. Councillor Shoesmith.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. So I'm to understand we've been behind on these for some time. My question is, do we have a handle on what the current deficit on that is? I missed that.
Thank you, Councillor Shoesmith. I mean, our total infrastructure deficit is over $100 million, but that's not because of recent under contributions to that reserve. That's for a lot of factors. So it's in there somewhere. It's buried in that number. I'll also remind council that a part of that underfunding is because of the $600,000 annual loan payment for the operations facility, which is next year is the last year for that.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Hamilton.
But if I'm not mistaken, we're suffering through that loan liability repayment because we were underfunding our reserves for our public works facility. So
Yeah, it really is a pay me now or pay me later. Yeah. Councillor Audie Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. CFO, we're currently doing debt servicing to about 838K. Is that roughly right? So we know that the 600 will come off the books after 2025. What about the remaining 238?
Thank you, Councillor Audie Kelly. That 238, I believe, is made up of 4 different loans. One of which is the Second Ave redevelopment. That's not quite what it's called, but refurbishment or something like that. And
Downtown revitalization.
yeah, thank you. And that was done 22, 23 years ago, and that was a 25-year loan. So that one's almost done. And then there's a couple of loans in the sewer department, which the names of those escape me. But I will bring back the expiry dates on those. But again, those are funded primarily by sewage fees and not taxation.
Sure.
Further? Yeah.
So, and just to clarify for folks, we have a debt servicing ceiling of approximately 3.8 million. So therefore, right now, until all those things are paid off, we're at about 3. And we do have some projects we are looking at having to borrow from. So I guess what I'm trying to say is awesome that we're paying off that debt, but that potentially might not be where we could put money into reserves because we're going to probably have to borrow again for other items. Did that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. And that discussion will be part of the financing strategy for those assets you're referring to in the not too distant future.
Councillor Shoesmith.
Thank you. Partly because I can't remember and partly for the benefit of people watching. The money that we have socked into infrastructure reserves, is that managed? Does that have a rate of return as opposed to the? Yeah, that's the question.
Thank you, Councillor Shoesmith. So all of our funds for reserves and our operating expenses through the year are invested in various sources, and so that 5.5% I mentioned earlier includes those reserve funds. So the amount that's in the actuals on the sheets is just the operating budget portion, and then there's another like similar amount, so another 500,000 that gets put it back into reserves, which is it's reflected in the reserve spreadsheet.
Thank you.
Councillor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. On page 74, there is one line item which says SPF Fund Capital Infrastructure Renewal for $5.8 million in 2023 budget. Like, just wondering what that was.
Thanks, Councillor Ramirez.
Page
64.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I thought, yeah.
It's right.
So,
in the middle.
yeah, thank you. That amount, the 5.68 million, was the amount that we had budgeted last year for the grant we applied for, which we didn't get. And so we did amend the budget. I failed to amend this cell on the spreadsheet. So that project wasn't done because we didn't get the grant last year. No, that was for the,
Oh, that's right.
that was for the like downtown infrastructure upgrade between 4th Street and First Street. Director Hausler has some more detail.
Yeah, just for clarity, through to council, that targeted, don't quote me, phase 2B of the IICP and some of the brick manholes downtown, as well as some downtown upgrades. That was the SPF grant application was for that, and we didn't get that one.
Further?
Maybe it's a little bit too nitty-gritty question again, like what's the holdup on the brick manholes? Like, why can't we fix it sooner than later?
Through to council, the brick manholes, we can Band-Aid them sooner with spraying a liner in there. However, if you look at the IICP, there's a lot of related infrastructure in the area that needs work, like pipes and roads. And so if we want to do it properly, or if we want to, I'd say like the quick fix is the liner, and then you can remove the manhole and replace it, but then you're ripping up the road. And if you're ripping up the road, you may as well go after the pipes. And so that's why the IICP kind of has everything overlaid.
Mhm.
And as we add in some of these new studies that we're doing, such as the pavement condition assessment, we're just going to have a really good citywide view of where we should be putting our efforts. And it'll identify areas where we can put asphalt money and just water money, and areas where we can just put asphalt money, or like the whole utility system may need revitalization. And then we can upgrade that all and integrate our ATMP cross section. So, you know, using those master documents, the IICP and the ATMP, and like as we move forward and tick off projects and consolidate more information, they'll just help us guide our investment in more effective ways.
Thank you, Mr. Eisler.
Thank you. And I also thought of something to add to Councillor Hamilton's point about funding the operations facility from reserves that we didn't have. The good news is that at least it's transparent now what our actual reserve balance is, and it's a starting point to move forward from. This is our safety department. There is an increase in education and training there because we've, quite frankly, that there's a lot of training courses that we could be providing to our staff for them to do their job safely and also stay up to date with their qualifications. I do have a list that I can share at a later time.
Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. Just a quick clarification. Is that number for all departments or just the safety department? Like as far as safety training and upgrading those skills?
Thank you. That is for the safety department to use on all the other departments, but there's also training budgets in other departments for different purposes other than safety, you know, like continuing professional development or something like that.
So yeah, I guess I should have been a little more specific, but you did answer. I was wondering if that was safety training specifically for all departments or just the safety department, but thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Adia Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. For a refresher for everyone, and also for people listening, as I recall, investing in safety did pay some dividends in, first of all, lost time and things like that, but also our premiums. Can you maybe just recap that for folks, CFO?
Sure, thanks for bringing that up. Councillor Adia Kelly. Yeah, our WorkSafe premiums again fell by quite a bit this year. Unfortunately, it's buried in the benefits line, which increased, but that certainly helped offset it by, you know, I think it was roughly just under another 200,000 that was savings on those premiums alone. And as we, we're still working towards getting our core certification, which will even reduce those even more, hopefully, in the next couple of years. So it's really great work. And this, small increase in investment will, again, pay more dividends going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Ramirez?
Thanks, Your Worship. I'm still caught with Public Works. Sorry, I'll ask questions about safety a little later. There was on page 62, there was about $26,000 on snow dump suite study. Is that consultant work? And if yes, is there opportunity to do it in-house?
Yes, through the council, you're getting a bit ahead of me. I was going to touch that towards the end of my part of the presentation. That's one of the projects that's going to be wrapping up. We have some advice on our existing snow dumps. We have some new guidelines to follow when we use them. And the final piece of that project was to explore some potential future snow dumps should we need them, and where it would make sense with long hauls and short hauls and that type of an approach.
Your worship?
Yeah.
To respond to the remainder part of your question, that was a consultant study, simply because we do not have the capacity to do a study like that while also advancing the capital projects. The engineering project manager, which you see both partially in operating and in capital, is capitalized because they directly manage those capital projects rather than using consulting project managers, and then also provide some in-house engineering project, not some, fantastic in-house engineering project management, but their capacity is fully allocated, and we needed external expertise on sort of regulations. We'd be taking someone away from providing core services to do that work internally.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so then this slide is our mobile equipment expense slide. This is where all of our fleet insurance goes, fuel, operator time, repairs, and then it's kind of our way to measure what our contribution to reserve should be using our internal equipment charge out rates, just based on how much time each piece of equipment spends in certain situations. And so the reason this slide is here is, again, to bring attention to our actual transfer to reserve being the reduced amount, and has been now for 4 or 5 years. Well, I should say it has been for a while, but on paper, it has been for 4 or 5 years. And then this slide is a 5-year history of our transfer to reserve. It's been pretty steady for the last 3 or 4 years. The main difference between this year and last year is that our gas tax amount from the province is lower, which is not a function of our own contribution to our reserves. And then, in 2022, you can see that contribution to our financial stabilization reserve, which was a result of basically the RCMP being understaffed. And again, there's no amount there in that cell for this year. And then this slide is I'm just summing up expenses basically, and I would like to take a pause here to see if there's any other questions on expenses before I move on. Okay, thank you. And then this slide we saw last week. It remains mostly the same. The only difference is the shortfall number decreased by about 21,000 due to those business licenses change that I talked about earlier. So that results in if it were all to be funded by taxation, would be 6.02%, and last week it was 6.33. And then I took a stab at a different kind of graph to visualize this change here. Starting point of 0 is last year's budget, and then you can see the orange cells here are an increase in revenue, which bring us above last year's budget, and then the varying increases in expenses in brown there, which bring us to just under 600,000. These are the major categories. So there's another category that I could put here that would bring us to the 602,000. But this is just a different way to visualize it. And now we're on to capital.
Councilor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just conceptually, Director, like this year, obviously, we had a warmer winter season with fewer full days of plowing. So we came in at what, $750,000, roughly somewhere. Say we had same heavy snowfall this year too, and we spent like $1 million instead of 750. Would the shortfall be $250,000 more?
Thank you, Councilor Ramirez. So that particular department, there was savings there reflected in our external contracts because the last few years we have had warmer years and less snowfall. And so the idea behind the reduction there is that if we do have a major snowfall year and end up spending in that area, then we have that financial stability operating reserve to lean back on, which our residents have already been taxed for. And so, that's there for that reason, in case we do have a ballooning expense area one year. So that's savings in tax now, but there's also a cushion there should there be an emergency. Does that answer your question? Thank you. This is a summary of our capital expenses, but I wanted to, Mayor Milligan, I don't know if you wanted to take this chance to have a recess, or should we keep going?
I'll look around the room and how are people feeling? I think everybody's fine to keep going.
Okay, sure. So this slide just summarizes our capital plan by department. The first column is last year's budget, and then our actuals, and then this year's budget. We're going to talk about each of these rows in quite a bit more detail in the next 40 slides. But this is what it looks like. So our capital plan is just over 10 million this year. And then this slide, which is very readable, is our funding sources for that capital plan. So the top, yeah, and this is also in your workbook too. Yeah. I don't have the page number, but so that page 43, thank you. 23, thank you. The top section is our reserves that are funding the various projects. And then the bottom section are alternative sources of funding. So one is our RMI reserve, which is mainly funded by the province. And then we've got some grant funded projects there too. Question.
Councilor McIsaac.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think it would be interesting, Your Worship, to see the money that's coming out of reserves alongside the amount of money that's going into the reserves, so that we can see what the delta is between those. I think that would be a useful slide at some point over the course of the budget.
I think it's a great idea.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Burden.
So which brings us to the next slide.
I don't know if that shows how smart you are or me. I'm not sure. I'm going to say you.
I prepared this really fast. So this slide, the blue column there, also this is page 24 of your workbooks. This is the opening balance of reserves, which includes our interest that we earned last year, the 5.5%. And then, so adding back any contributions, or sorry, even I can't read this. Okay, so then the second column, apologies, is our budgeted contributions to reserves. And then the third column is our expected expenses from those reserves. And then the two gold columns there are the balances for the next 3 years, projected balances. Of particular note is the sewer reserve, which is just over halfway down the page there. You'll notice in 2025, projected balance is negative, and it was like that last year. And the intent is for this fall is once we get through our studies and have a better handle on what exactly we need to do with our sewage system is to have a discussion with council on our current fees and what our funding strategy should be to get through that. I mean, there could be grants that reduce the burden on this reserve. There could be another option for borrowing, or there's lots of different options, but we just don't have that amount yet to do that detailed funding strategy. So it's okay as it is for it to be negative next year. I mean, it's still positive this year with our current plan, but it's certainly an area of risk that we've been aware of for a few years now. And then now we're going to get into more detail by department of our major projects. Before I hand it off to Director Hausler, I just want to remind council of what our major critical projects continue to be going forward. Again, I mentioned sewage, the wastewater system assessment. We've got our Ferry Creek Reservoir that we're putting a lot of time and money into. And then the CNL right-of-way, which is the slope kind of above Alpine Trails, which has been identified as at risk of failing, and therefore at significant risk to our infrastructure that's there. So those continue to be advanced, a plan to address those issues. And now I will turn it over to Director Hausler.
I think Bryn's gonna take control here for me. There's a couple, I've pretty much prepared these by department as well as similar categories. And I'll kind of run through this slide here, which kind of indicates the notable and larger projects. And then I have a slide on each one of those. If you have more details that might come in that slide, if not, we can stop after each department and you can ask questions or as we go, whatever you prefer. So we're starting with wastewater. Before we even get into wastewater, the majority of engineering and public works projects fall into the quality services strategic goal. So I won't repeat myself on that one too much. That's kind of what we're working under for the next 16 slides here. And like I said, I've noted the more notable projects, whether they are new or carry forwards or have no capital, but have staff time invested in it. Next slide there. Starting with wastewater system compliance and assessment, this is just carrying forward. We are moving out of the data collection and into design and starting to identify what type of treatment we will need for the system. A big part of that will be aeration and treating our alum and other elements, but keep aeration in your mind as I kind of come up to another part of this department.
Councilor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just to be clear, Director, we're still on schedule on this, right? Like last update we had was back in December. Since December to now, nothing has changed. We are right on schedule.
Yeah, if you'll recall, we had our timeline crunched on us by the regulator, shortened 6 months, but we are on schedule so far. Yeah. And then there's 3 elements on this next slide, the aeration base and maintenance, which a big part of that is desludging. We did, as a reminder, we did pond 1 last year. There is also a tear in this one, so we just called it a maintenance project to bundle it together. There's also the blower replacement, which is actually underway. We have an order placed, and then vegetation maintenance to deal with the 2 types of plants we're struggling with out there. They all fall underneath the same goal, but of ensuring effective treatment and making sure we're hitting our regulatory levels that we need to hit. Just a note on the blower, we've tried a different model on this last award, one that's a little bit more supposedly efficient. So we have our 2 models that we've replaced. And then this new model, which hopefully we can get some better or lower power consumption on that unit. Perfect. And this is the aeration system business case. So this has no capital impact. However, once we go down the path of design on our lagoon system, if aeration is still going to be part of that design, we've come across a lot of different systems that have more energy efficiency and in particularly less O&M costs. So we want to spend some time. If, you know, our plan is Q4, we find out that we're sticking with aeration, then we want to spend some internal staff time to evaluate whether there's a more effective aeration system out there that we can plan to move towards. It's particularly one that's lower O&M costs. Right now we have, you know, the lines running down the ponds and roughly 150 diffusers in each pond. And if they blow off or they need maintenance, it's all manually done. So it takes a lot of time, and we have snow on those ponds for 4 months of the year. So a reduced window to actually access them.
Sorry, Mr. Heiser. So these projects are to keep us in compliance.
The aeration, this one specifically is just an efficiency we're looking for within our system to free up more of our operator time,
Okay.
reduce energy costs, and potentially switch to a different aeration system that might get us better bang for our buck.
So are these with an eye to, so as I understood it, we would work with the regulator. There was a project to work with the regulator to make sure we were in compliance. Our permit, had our permit appropriately adjusted, and we were in compliance with that permit.
That's correct. Yeah, I think you're muddying the two projects. So the wastewater system assessment and compliance is one siloed project. But through that project, if the design is saying, hey, you're still going to use aeration and ponds, then we want to initiate this project. Okay, we're keeping these aeration systems. Is there better aeration systems out there? And then we might have this business case ready at the time we do those renos or not. But either way, we need to get into compliance within that time frame by the regulator.
Okay, I guess probably I'm muddying the two things, because so as we're working with the regulator to come into compliance and we identify a piece of technology that will support that compliance, does that then set us on a track for, rather than rebuilding the entire system, having a system that works into the future? If you see what I'm saying, like this is an incremental improvement to our existing system. As such, we're not looking at a whole scale change. We're improving it as we go, and we'll continue in compliance.
Yeah, that's correct. I guess the example I can give is our whole system is not viable and we need to go to a full mechanical system with clarifiers, and the aeration basins aren't needed and the ponds aren't needed. Then we won't do this. So that's kind of the angle I'm trying to say. We're not going to spend any time on this until
I see. Okay.
our continued aeration element of our treatment is still in play.
Okay, thank you.
Next slide.
Oh, sorry,
Oh.
Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Worship. Just curious about the aeration basin number 2 maintenance. Is that sludge removal? So that's a big number, 550. Does that include the repair of the liner as well? Is that part of it?
Through to Councillor, we have included that. Yeah.
Okay, great.
We typically, part of that type of a project is lowering the water level, and that's what we would want to go and do with the liner repairs.
Smart. Thank you.
I think we can jump to the next
Councillor
slide.
Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. Director, this is not a capital question. It's more an operating expenses question that I forgot to ask in the previous slide. I did look at page 65 and 66, for example, and like I noticed that, you know, overtimes and paid leave allocations isn't coming down this year compared to previous year. And if I recall, we did increase the headcount in that department, didn't we? So that was the whole justification behind that, wasn't it? That if you have more headcount, you would have fewer overtimes and paid leaves.
Through to council. No, it was not to reduce overtime. It was just to meet the maintenance that we knew we
Okay.
weren't doing.
Okay.
We should be doing.
Okay.
And so the aeration system business case is directly trying to free up more of our existing operator time.
Okay,
Overtime in utilities is tricky because typically it's after hour alarmy type stuff that somebody has to respond whether we like it or not.
just to follow up, Your Worship.
Yeah.
And also like salaries also have been overestimated in the past year, where, you had certain level, you came in lower. Will that continue this year also? Like, how confident are you with those numbers?
Thanks, Councilor Ramadas. For salaries, the way it's done is it's just the amount of people in that department and their salaries. But then sometimes, on heavy snow days, instead of relying on overtime, those operators will help run snowplow or something. So then they code their time to snow removal. And then again, at year end, I will do, I'll make sure that the time in sewer has been spent in sewer and whatnot. So
Happening where we're swapping streets folks with water and sewage?
Yeah, it's still happening, but significantly less. In 2016, we had one wastewater operator, and that person on a snow day would go run the snow blower. Now we have we have 5 wastewater operators. There's a snow day. Sure, take 3. We're going to get 2 and keep them working on the system and keeping the maintenance going forward. All right, I think we're on water. Yep. So once again, I'm just highlighting notable carry forward projects and some new ones. Jumping one more slide ahead there. There we go. Reservoir structural remediation and exposed utility lines. These are both projects coming forward from last year. The reservoir structural remediation bid is actually open right now and it's closing soon. Obviously that was overbid last year and we have what we feel is a more reasonable budget to achieve the goal there. We do also have the exposed utility lines on Coal Creek. They were identified one after the atmospheric river. Just as a reminder, when the water levels were low, we could see the lines. We also had one bid on that was significantly over budget at $400,000. Staff is revisiting this to evaluate some other options such as steel plating. The cost escalation on that overbid was significantly related to mitigating the river itself, regulatory and physically rerouting the river as they would do the repairs. And I just wanted to note 40,000 is not the permanent fix for that. That's just the Band-Aid until we can make a longer plan, which may be reboring those lines across the creek or something more permanent. Next slide. Low pressure zone leakage study. This is also one project that would feed into a future IICP update. So this is a citywide scan for leakage. It'll narrow in on chlorine water, and it can get us within roughly 2 blocks. This is something that's being used in certain neighborhoods in the city of Calgary, and our project engineer has had a lot of discussions with them. Once we've narrowed in on our low pressure zones, which are mainly Maintown and the Annex, and we're within 2 blocks, then we're going to try to use internal staff, go out at night and see if we can ourselves locate these big leaks. There's probably no silver bullets out there that's going to save us 20 liters a second, but we know the low pressure zone. We know it's Maintown and Annex. And if we do this scan for $32,000, we can get within 2 blocks. Now we can go out and see how much effort it takes on our own to do that, or if we're in over our head. Generally, that's the plan with that. And then that can also be rolled into a future IICP update to highlight. I'm going to make things up, but for example, Maintown North has a major leak somewhere by 6th Street and we need to figure it out.
Councillor Hamilton?
Thank you. You just mentioned something that kind of caught my ear. Going out at night to do it. Is there a specific reason for that? I think I know the answer, but.
Through to council, if we do use audio technology, we want a quieter night to do it. Yeah. Next slide. James Oil pumping capacity. So this project.
Sorry, Director Heiser. Councillor Ramadas?
Thanks, Your Worship. Just from our tour there, Director, I remember there was this one lift station in Annex. Was it a lift station? I can't remember, which wasn't communicating. If we didn't even have communication equipment there, is that going to be fixed this year? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, through to council. We
On
have
10th Ave.
2 lift stations in the annex, the 10th Street, which is a physical building, and then 11th Street, which is an in-ground one. Typically, we've started solving some of our comms issues. The lagoons was actually the first one we tried it on with SIM cards and switching to cellular as opposed to radio. Radio, when the leaves came out, we'd lose signal. When the snow stuck to the leaves, we'd lose signal. And so Burma lift station has a SIM card. The lagoons blowers has a SIM card now, and another one that I can't quite remember right now, but we're kind of plucking away at those, and those are usually like $3,000 to $4,000 fixes that we just operationalize. Yeah, James White Well. So this project is related to the line along the highway near the Cedars. Generally, this project wants to evaluate that line, evaluate our system, which somewhat relates to the temperature of the water coming out of the wells, to see if we can increase those pumps to their max capacity of 200 liters a second from 150. This would also help us reduce water quality advisories, because in the event we have turbid water at Ferry Creek, we can run the wells during a dry month. We can get past 150 to 200. But then once we cross 200, we've hit the limit of those wells, and we will have to go back to a turbid source and go to whatever the water quality advisory is. But that gives us a little bit more buffer before we have to switch.
Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Worship. What's our confidence level we're going to be able to use the James White Well water in the near future?
Yeah, through to council, I can't predict the saline levels in the river. If I could, I would tell you, but having that backup source in the meantime, while we go through the extensive process of getting new wells, will like $16,000 is money well spent on that to give us 50 liters a second and reduce, even if it's 2 water quality advisories a summer, that's less turbid water going into our system, less flushing we have to do to clean it out. It just compounds. I don't know if I answered your question there.
You did, yes, thank you.
Yeah, and I appreciate the perspective that it's money well spent regardless, because if a second, well, we'll call it a third source, is a few years away.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
I'd say, and then, yeah, and then some, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Next on the list are the Ferry Creek source upgrades, filtration, and the alternative groundwater source, which we just mentioned. I just wanted to remind council that the Ferry Creek source upgrades naming convention, that was at the point where we were still pursuing a filtration exemption and likely going to UV treatment at Ferry Creek, which is pretty much off the table now. Now we're not pursuing that anymore, and we're working with tech to design and build a filtration system. But that's just the naming convention that's carrying forward in that project. We're still using the data collected on Ferry Creek for the design of the filtration plant. Okay, here we go. Other advancing critical infrastructure projects, the fire hall, Mountain View Dike improvements, and active transportation missing sidewalks. So you can skip to the next slide. Specifically with the fire hall, we are into preliminary design where we're going to determine costing and a funding strategy with consultants. There's
Councillor
rough.
Ramadas, sorry.
Sir.
Thanks, Your Worship. There was, in the binder, I saw 3rd Street dike improvement. Am I getting the?
I don't think, just one moment. Okay, yeah, so that one I didn't include in my slides. However, at the beginning of my slideshow, we're kind of set, in order to get more effective bids, we're separating the design and construction years. Typically, we're going to do this street, utility, and road cross section, but we're going to do the design and construction. And by the time the design's done, we're putting it out for tender in June, and we're getting not very competitive bidding. So we're separating those two. So what you probably are seeing is the 3rd Street dike design, which is the apartments.
Oh, the Quatrine Apartment.
Quatrine Apartments has been identified in the dike study that we have as one of the next phases following the Mount View dike, which is, I think, two more slides down.
Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Worship. This is not question specific to that, but more of a general question. This came up last year when we were discussing roads and so on, and Director Hauser just as kind of referred to strategically approaching breaking up projects in order to make them more financially viable. One of the things that's been talked about before, and I know it's been tried at least once before, is this idea of saving up a bunch and bundling together in order to go out to tender. And typically, I think not so much because it's necessarily cheaper, but because we just get more responses when it's a decent sized project. And I'm wondering, are we looking at these projects with that eye when we're talking about road-based projects or and so on, where we're going? I know last year we chose not to do that and wait, but to do a couple of piecemeal projects. And so we didn't get to take advantage of that. But I'm just wondering, is there an eye to that right now, or this idea of bundling? I know getting earlier has been a strategic, I think that's a strategic win for us already. I'm just wondering if this is also something that's coming up. Thank you.
Yeah, through to council, we have had that approach. You'll notice we don't have like a major roads construction project. We just have the missing sidewalk project this year. I think it would be good if that's the direction council would want to go, to like formalize that in a meeting that we're going to do every 2 years. We'll do a design year and then we'll do a construction year maybe, or something like that. If that's an approach we want to take, I'm more than happy to do that. But I would like to formalize that with council, because like our our integrated infrastructure capital plan, we can use that and just like bundle and design 2 years projects and carry it forward. And there may be savings on holding that funding for a year in reserves.
Councillor Shoesmith?
There's quite a lot there. Thank you, Mayor Milligan. I would definitely be interested in having a meeting on that.
Councillor Ramirez.
And in that same conversation, Your Worship, I wouldn't mind getting some insight on consultant work too. Like, I know I've been a little harsh during some of the council meetings in the past, but really I want to understand, like, what's the quality of work that they're providing? Is there opportunity to in-house some of the things? I don't know. It's a broad question, but likely insights is required on that.
Making a note, Mr. McCollum. Councillor Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. Director Heisler, is this August 2020 the most recent iteration of the capital plan? Like this one?
The IICP?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's only the one.
There's only the one?
Yeah,
Thank you.
I would like to note though, through to council, that like keep in mind, the wastewater system wasn't included in that. And I think the number out of that project was 67 million plus what we're going to have to put into the wastewater system. Okay. The next slide we have here is the Mountain View Dike improvements. So this was grant funded. However, I wanted to note the initial aspect of this project was to focus on the bin wall and then raise the dike in a bunch of different areas, not the complete dike, but what we could get funding for. Our preliminary investigations into this is that all that grant money will probably have to be focused on just the bin wall, as it's in worse shape than what we expected, but that is underway.
And will we go after additional grant funding for the balance?
Yeah, that's correct. I think the discussion we need to have internally with staff will be the next two priorities that we kind of need to weigh on the scales are raising Mountain View Dike or addressing the complete lack of a dike on 3rd Street.
Right.
And we may tilt towards just getting 3rd Street and then at a later date coming and finishing up the Mountain View Dike. Because if the bin wall's repaired, we do have the full perimeter of the dike now, although some elevations could be raised, but 3rd Street has nothing.
Thank you. Councillor Shoesmith.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. With the town approaching being completely diked off, do we have sumps and pumps in case we've got significant water behind the dikes?
Yeah, through to council, As part of the West Fernie upgrades, we got 4 fairly large 8-inch trash pumps, and we got 2 crate pumps. So they live in the warehouse. Every spring, the crews go out with some of the firefighters and we fire them up and just remind ourselves how to use them. So we do have some capacity to push back against the river, but ultimately we are fighting Mother Nature. Good, all right. Next slide. This one's come up a couple times, the active transportation missing sidewalks. So the project budget's 902. We have an application in for $500,000 grant. The city's contribution would be the balance of that. And this is just a priority project from the ATMP to connect missing sidewalk links. Proactive infrastructure design. So I did touch on this. There's a couple projects on here. I won't go through a whole lot, but our strategy to separate design from construction and get design ahead of time to be ready for grant funding and to engage and get more competitive building, which would feed into the, maybe the discussion about bulking our capital projects in different years. There's also some bylaw work in there to manage water use and standardize our infrastructure. If there's any questions on the items in here, I don't have any slides that go through these individually. I'll take them now. Okay, next slide.
Sorry, yeah, I just waited to change the slide.
The third street dike is in there. So.
Okay, no, I was just wondering about the question was asked earlier about snow dumps and just whether through that study, am I right to understand that they become effectively contaminated sites? And are we accepting a liability by expanding, a significant liability by expanding our?
I think a lot of that'll come out in the report that's going to come back at the end of this one. This was triggered. The spark of this came from Isabella Dickin with a student report about litter. We looked into that. And then we started looking into how close our dumps were getting to the river. That's why this project was initiated, mainly focusing on the boat launch, our concern. And what we learned was, okay, you can do it. You need to control the litter, but you need to stay 30 meters away from high water level. Then we wanted to know about, okay, if we do expand our center plow and haul, where would we go while we were doing this project? So that was the last piece of the puzzle. And then we're happy with that at this point. Okay. But there is some level of salt contamination when you do that. So we should be mindful about where we put it. We'll see what the report says once it's done. I would hesitate to go near the river again because I don't know what future regulatory requirements will.
Yeah, fair. Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. The illumination study, can you just help us recall what that is?
Yeah, through to council. That was a study looking at our street lights, and that report is also nearing the end. Just kind of a high level comment on it now, what we're learning is high pressure sodium bulbs, the amount of intensity they put out when they were first installed diminishes. And then you pop in an LED, that's the equivalent, and people get very excited. So what's our allowable amount of wattage to legally light the street? That's the type of stuff we wanted to have out of there so that we could have something to reference when people were asking for wattage reductions or concerned about lighting.
Mr. Baranowski.
Thank you. Mr. Heisler is correct. You may recall, or you may have noticed when the switch to LED lights was made, it felt really bright around town. And we'd requested a straight, same illumination, keep it the same. And so we did that on paper, but the reality is they're much brighter. And so this study was to help us develop a plan on how to shift from that decision, which was made to exchange same for same, into what can we do to get to a better system overall. So this actually, based on, this actually will provide a roadmap to how we should be developing these, because there are some considerations about how far light spreads and safety.
Councillor Adia Kelly.
You'll probably laugh, Your Worship. But when all these reports are done, can we have copies of them to read, please? Thank you.
Yes, for sure. I just want to.
Sorry, Mr. Heisler. Councillor Shoesmith.
Yeah, if I could really quickly, I just wanted to add to the illumination study. So as a reminder, the BC Hydro Initiative to replace all streetlights. I don't remember the year that was their target. It was a 5-year program. That was what Fernie experienced, was them coming to town and changing their lights. We still do have a lot of city lights out there, and the general rule is wooden pole hydro, metal pole city. And our lights are still high pressure sodium. So in the future, I would like to bring forward a project following this thing at a time when it makes sense in the capital plan to switch ours over to LED too. And then we can also realize savings on the utility costs that we pay.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. Yeah, I recall we brought this up fairly early in the term. And I'm really excited for the study results. It's quite interesting. I'll be able to read it by the street lamp outside my house in the middle of the night. Yeah, no, literally. Looking forward for this one.
Councillor Ravenous.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just to add to the comment that CAO made, it's not just the human safety, it's also wildlife. Like there's been plenty of studies these days that says artificial illumination is having a negative effect on life cycle of many animals and plants and insects and whatnot. So I'm keen to see the study report.
Carry on.
Carry on. I think this is my last slide here. Yeah, so I just wanted to touch on a lot of projects that you may see budgets carrying over from even 22, 23 forward. These are a lot of the things that are, we just got some final steps, and I'll quickly rattle through them. The Mountain View Dike, the culvert on the far end, we just have some final landscaping on that one in the spring, as well as the 2023 roads rehabilitation. And as I mentioned before, the pavement condition assessment, which will inform effective capital investment, the streetlight illumination review, which will inform future design and modification requests, as well as potentially an LED upgrade. And the skate park has a little bit of landscaping as well. And the organics collection, which we touched on last night, should have a spring rollout. And the stormwater model validation, which we do, I think, every 3 years, that informs ours and our developers' capacity. And that's it for me. If there's any questions.
Council? I have one, I guess, sort of goes back to me muddying the waters about sewage treatment, and just trying to understand, is there a possibility that as we work toward compliance and we identify technologies that we can put in place, and I'm not asking you to give a level of confidence or anything like that, Mr. Heiser, but is there a possibility that as we advance, we will find ourselves not in a position, because we've sort of been under the impression that we're going to have to replace our entire, at least the final stages of our treatment system. But is there a possibility that we'll identify technologies that won't necessitate that?
Are you talking from a perspective of like the large capital investment question? Yeah, I think without committing to anything, the preliminary results are not indicating that we're going to have to do a major change. We are going to have to do some hybrid modifications. I don't know if that is enough for you to lean on.
Well, it's encouraging, but it's
I can stick with encouraging.
Yeah, it's still, it would be nice to know as we discover things, as soon as you know that we know, so we could get a lot of pressure about what's happening with our sewer system.
Yeah, and through to council as a reminder, step 1 is just getting compliance.
Yeah.
Step 2 is capacity.
Yeah, no, understood.
And the future of Fernie, which is another bill.
Fair. Councillor Artie Kelly.
So just to clarify, the aeration, part of the aeration, that piece that you spoke of, that business case, is dependent on?
Yes, through to council completely. So if things go sideways during the project and they're like, you need to go to clarifiers and you're not going to have aeration, then we wouldn't do the business case,
right,
and we wouldn't be investing in that system anymore. We would steer towards our new clarifier system. I don't see that being the road we're going down at this point, but we don't want to do the business case if it's not needed. Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
fair. Yeah.
I'll take crossed fingers.
Yeah, cross fingers all around. Other questions for Mr. Heiser? Councilor Shoesmith.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. Just, that is a heartening thought. That's all. It's pretty hopeful sounding. I mean, this is the biggest issue we're going to face, I suspect. The chance that it's not going to be all that dire is great.
Well, it's the first hopeful message I think we've received on this file.
I can take a turn if you wish. I got,
Councilor Ramirez.
Nobody asked for this, Your Worship, but I am personally very excited for the ATMP missing sidewalk. That's my favorite project for the year.
I'll cross your fingers for the grant then, I guess.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Eisler. I appreciate it very much.
Okay, I have a little bit different of a format. I have about 4 slides to go through. The way I've laid it out is at the top. I've linked council's priorities up top. And within the 4 slides, I sort of touch on the general themes of the capital plan for this year. So to start off in the first slide, advancing facility asset management. So I want to start off by basically explaining, since my tenure here, May 2018, it'll be 6 years in May. I've seen a transformation as far as the type of work that my department does. We've transitioned from fighting fires, running around, things that are exploding or breaking down, wreaking havoc. We've moved away from that, and we've sort of addressed the big issues. And now we're transitioning into this. It's time to take a step back, review what we've done, dig in documents, and start developing a plan for investing in facilities for the future. So that's sort of the theme behind this slide. So a couple of things that we're looking to do is redo facility assessments. So it was noted in the capital budget, I think $60,000. And what we're trying to do is just provide ourselves with a new look on facilities and take into account all the work that's been done since 2013 when the original facilities master plan was done that also had condition assessments. And this is all to present to council a 5-year capital plan that we can stand behind and that's well informed. Digging back into the past, looking at plans that were made for the future and maybe not followed, trying to find all those things that we maybe missed along the way and addressing those as we go. Sorry, Councilor Ramirez, did you have a question?
Oh, sorry, Councilor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just curious, Director, like, why wouldn't we just rely on the 2013 report? Like, why do this now?
Through the chair. So the 2013 master plan was done in 2012.
Sure.
And there's been significant work completed in there. Because the city lacks asset management software or the ability to track all that work over time, there's nothing that's sort of taking the data and the work that's been done and telling us what now the state of the facility is in. So going through that master plan, and we've already started this, it gives us a clear picture of what's left to do. And then by providing that to someone to do a new assessment, they can focus on the things that haven't been done or the areas that were a concern and not addressed, and give us a full picture that also takes into account all the work that's been done to date. And so I feel like that's extremely important when it comes to determining level of services or potentially what facilities we want to divest in, because it'll give us an accurate picture of the state of that facility and what's left to do and the price tag that comes with what's left to do. So I'm very familiar with the facility master plan, as I am the leisure service master plan. And there's been a ton of work done in it, but there's nothing to update that report in the 10 years that have gone by.
Right.
So it's stale data that still is useful in some ways, as the leisure service master plan is as well, but it doesn't really give us a clear picture to move forward from here, which is what I'm hoping to get.
Yeah, I appreciate that perspective, Mr. Logan, because you've worked your way through that plan, but those buildings have continued to age. And consequently, you don't have a current assessment of what they're like.
Yeah, and it's sort of, if you take, for example, the courthouse building, it's a very complicated building. There's a lot of heritage components. There's a lot of things that weren't taken into account when that original master plan was done. For example, the slate tile roof, we just spent $40,000 last year just doing minor repairs. And there's still a ton of repairs needed on that building to make it sort of up to today's standards. None of that was taken into account in the 2013 facility master plan. So there's a lot of like underlying issues that might not have been exposed that now staff is aware of, that we would ask the people doing the new assessments to key in on and focus, or you know, apply the new accessibility standards or the recent building code upgrades and give us a clear picture, if that makes sense. So part of the work is also to establish regular preventative maintenance contracts. So we've gone from having an HVAC journeyman to now an electrician journeyman. So they obviously can do different types of work. So we're going to go back to sort of transitioning to having our boilers, our rooftop units, our makeup air units under contract. So we'll be able to basically understand what the costs are going to be throughout the year for the basic level of maintenance that's required for preventative maintenance. We're also continuing asset management training. So Director Hausler is a certified asset management professional, and I hope to be one as well in about 3 months. There's also another journeyman in my department who's pursuing a maintenance management professional designation. So all this is going to help when we do implement what we found this year into a software and start moving forward and populating that software to be able to give us good data that we can use for decision making. What else I got here? I did want to note that there's 2 things that are being pushed. One of them was asset management software that was in the budget for 2023. As Director Burdett mentioned, there was some work being done to sort of assess how we use our technology and see if we're not utilizing it to its full potential. And until that work's completed, we won't have a good understanding of what we need to address that gap in asset management software. As well as the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, which was decided at the leadership group to start that master plan after the OCP was updated. So the OCP would be able to inform that master plan. Next slide. So also one of the themes this year is health and safety upgrades. There's a couple projects that are already in the works, like for example, the main boiler with the insurance claim that's going on. We're still actively replacing that. One of the other big projects, about $100,000, I believe, was the aquatic center motor control unit, or 80,000, sorry. So this is basically the operating system for the aquatic center, and it's located in the mechanical room in the chlorine environment. So those components are being destroyed over sort of the life of the facility. And we're finding it difficult to source parts. They don't make them anymore. And we're needing to replace that so we can continue operating the facility. It's also going to be relocated out of the chlorine environment to the electrical room, which will definitely help that main control motor unit last longer. That sounded weird. We're doing some upgrades on the dog pound for insulation, so we don't burst pipes anymore. There's also a man lift purchase that was carried over from last year. We need an additional $20,000. When we went to tender, we weren't getting back something that met our needs, so we needed to add a little bit more to the budget. Doing some accessible stairs in the aquatic center, or that go into the main pool. The ones that are there quite decrepit. We're doing some under the bleachers storage in the arena, which is going to improve basically the safety in the hallways. We have a lot of users, not much space for them to store their stuff. And we're hoping to utilize some of that empty space under the bleachers. And it will have to be engineered and designed with fire and safety in mind. I just wanted to note that we do every year set aside some money for remediation work and hazard projects. So there's about $50,000 and some other money that's set aside for projects. Like all of these capital projects, there's potential to disturb hazardous materials that inflate the costs of the original budget. So there's a bit of a parachute built into our budget for those reasons. Couple little things like a stove at the community center. It's troublesome. It's consistently complained about from our bookings. And then there's some leased facility improvements. So I meet once a year, sort of pre-budget time, and ask all the leasees if they have anything they're concerned about or something they'd like me to look into as far as capital projects. And so this year, we're going to rekey the senior center. We've got a handrail and some stair improvements and a accessible washroom heater at the art station. We're going to replace the other library rooftop unit, and council made an amendment to use reserves to replace the one that failed. So this is the twin to that, same era, same make model. So probably not too far behind in failing.
Sorry, Mr. Logan. Councilor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. This might be a large-scale sort of a comment or a question here, Director. Like the aquatic center, when I look at the trajectory in your operating expense over the years, right, it has gone up significantly year after year. And I'm glad to see that probably for the first time in the last 3 years, where we have estimated it to be more realistic. We come in at around $900,000. This time you've said $1 million. Again, my question is, how confident are you that you will come within budget this year?
Well, there's a couple things to consider as we moved from pre-pandemic levels. More use, more time open in the facility is directly proportional to the amount of chemicals that's used and the amount of maintenance that's required. So essentially, the more the facility is open and the more it's used, which our staff has done a great job in programming. We've had a ton of successful events for youth, etc. So when we cram the pool full, we essentially go through way more chlorine than we would if it was a regular public swim and 20 people showed up. If we're packing it full of 100 people, all of those expenses go up as well. The power, the water, the chemicals, the maintenance. So I feel like it'll definitely stabilize, and the budgets will be easier to predict moving forward because we are back to that 7 days a week, fully operational type scenario. Hope that answered your question.
Thanks. Just to provide a little more context, I had notes about this in prior budget presentations, but part of the issue with our, we talked about it with Councillor Hamilton earlier about reserves not being adequate to fund the projects that we did. Part of the problem with like budgeting before 5 years ago is that some costs were historically under budget, and the pool was a big one. And then when I started, it was in the middle of COVID and it was already at reduced service levels. So that one's been a particularly hard building to nail down, especially as it's increased back to 7 days a week. So that's just a bit of background. We started with data that wasn't super strong, and then we've that's been a particular obvious adjustment of service level as COVID has transitioned out. So that's why it's appears to be, ballooning the last 3 years.
So just to be, sorry, Your Worship, just to be clear, we are a lot more confident this year compared to previous year is what I'm hearing.
Yes.
If I could just add to that, another thing to consider too is the department's been restructured 3 times since 2018. So with that comes some staff removed and their salaries removed. So I feel like it's probably taken this year, last year to get to the point where I think it truly represents the actual budget once we've sort of sorted out the growing pains, I guess. Is that a fair statement? Next slide.
Council, if I can, there are 2 holdovers from an earlier draft. We have some small occupational health and safety investments to make that are required for, depending on the number of employees in the operations facility at any given time, and an AED, which is a minor capital investment, pulled from the slide because they need some more scoping out before they come back to council. So apologies for seeing those in bold at the bottom of the last slide. We need a little more information on them.
Thank you.
And then the third slide's all about process improvement. So I only hit sort of the high level type stuff in policy, but I wanted to note the good work that's being done by the PFR staff. So we're forever improving our process, from anything to just the morning routine checklists to people scoping out their entire jobs. So if someone has to take their place from an extended leave, it's seamless. So there's all those types of things happening behind the scenes, but I'm only going to touch on policy here. So a carryover from the user fee bylaw was the advertising and sponsorship policy. It was recommended from council to remove some of the restrictive language from the bylaw and turn it into a policy. So council will be seeing an advertising and sponsorship policy. And this will establish guidelines for advertising and sponsorship throughout the city, and basically clarify our practice moving forward, and we can move away from past practice or gray areas. There's also a flag policy that we are working on currently. In the capital plan, there was proposed new flagpoles at City Hall and the Chamber. So our department is responsible for flags up and down and changing out for events. And it's pretty standard for any municipality to have a flag policy that sort of explains what we do and what we don't do. It's a very useful tool for my staff as the ones who are directed to raise or lower the flags. So it just more or less sets the service level for how we operate our flag poles.
When as you say that, I'm reminded of Nasuk and Gravel challenging us to raise the Yakat and Cleat flag at City Hall permanently.
And yourself committing to that, Your Worship. It is Mr. Logan's providing the policy backing to take action on that. That's a commitment that we have obviously made. And so we have the capital component, and then we have the policy and the management component as 2 twins as part of that.
Thank you. I didn't feel like I could say no. Councillor Nixon.
You stole my
Okay.
my comments.
Councillor Ramirez.
Similar sentiment here, Your Worship. My question was actually, I had written it down, if what happens if we don't spend that $60,000 on flagpoles? Like, I think you guys answered that question.
So, sorry, but did you want me to answer that?
No.
So right now we have the ability to raise and lower flags on 2 flagpoles. Everything else requires a bucket truck, and even the fire department goes out to the chamber and uses their ladder truck to change those flags. So the policy is, the policy can happen whether we get new flagpoles or not. It's written in such a way where it says, you know, on the poles that we are able to lower to half mast, we will. On the flags that we can't, we won't. It's basically going to remove the make work project of my staff running around and replacing flags. The new flagpoles will make it much easier, much faster, much more seamless. We'll be able to do more without, you know, draining resources for that day to do the flag up and down. Also, surveillance policy is another important thing for me to get done this year. We have cameras, they're not on. We need more cameras. The conversation about the community bins, I think there's a role for cameras to play there. We can't monitor facilities 24 hours a day. So technology plays a role in sort of mitigating the risk that comes with that.
Sorry, Mr. Logan, to Councillor Ramadas's earlier comment, surely there are communities around the province who have legally tested surveillance policies we can just borrow and improve on.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. The flag policy. My coordinator took 4 really nice policies from different municipalities and created one nice one for Fernie. So that's how policies are shared amongst municipalities. It's definitely something we take advantage of.
If I can, Your Worship, the policy is the easy part. The more difficult part is making sure that we're meeting all our freedom of information and protection of privacy obligations and do a proper privacy impact assessment and manage data governance and usage governance very carefully. So you're absolutely correct. Other municipalities have done it, but it's just time to get it done.
Yeah. Councillor Hamilton?
Thank you. This probably is a better point to have asked my earlier question about the cybersecurity side of things. And does that line item for cybersecurity and IT upgrades, would that encompass, if we're moving towards camera and data storage, like all of those privacy and security components to that as well?
Thanks, Councillor Hamilton. We'll make a note to add that to that question to provide a more thorough answer.
Councillor Ramadas?
Sorry, Your Worship, this might be a little premature, but and also may not be part of the 2024 financial plan, but I'm just wondering, like, if with our fire hall site selection done and moving forward, if we possibly have to commit to some kind of a facilities improvement on the ball diamond, what kind of flexibility we might have within this year if we were to course correct, you know what I mean? Like it's, any thoughts on that, like how that'll play out?
Mr. Heisler and I are working directly with Arcadis on the final piece of their work, which is the funding strategy for the fire hall. And we are re-engaging with all of the stakeholders and user groups who either responded to a expression of interest or who are directly involved in users, including ball, including skateboarders using the covered area and school district, et cetera. In parallel with the fire hall funding strategy will be internal work with those user groups who may be impacted or displaced or seek opportunities on the adjacent stuff and specifically the ball diamond opportunities. So that'll come in tandem, and we're not tearing up a ball diamond this year. It's the time to start doing some of our ground truthing and geotechnical studies, et cetera, that's already scoped out, but to bring those two things forward in parallel. So you'll know them before we're coming forward, I think, with a question on funding the fire hall. We'll know what the full implications are for the two service areas, right?
Right. Councillor Shoesmith?
2 things. Thank you, Mayor Milligan. I think given our decision on the fire hall, it would behoove us to be really proactive with any ball diamond related things. I think it would be best if people saw we were out in front of that rather than behind. And secondly, just for the record, not an argument I'd win, I don't think, but I don't really feel all that great about flying any flag other than the Canadian maple leaf. That's just a personal thing, but I think that's the only power we're really beholden to. But that's all. Thank you.
Councillor Adi Kelly.
Sorry, your worship. Can I backtrack us a little tiny bit, Director Logan, to surveillance?
Sure.
And FOI. Just thinking about, I know at UBCM, there were outsource for FOI requests. Like if we have a surveillance policy, it could lead to a greater increase in FOI requests, maybe if we're having cameras. And are we kind of considering a budget for that kind of stuff? Because working in government, I know that that takes up a considerable amount of time and there are timeframes that we have to meet. So just wondering if we've done any thought about that or set aside some possible budget money.
Pardon me? Yeah, not at this time. I haven't investigated surveillance policies myself yet, but that is a concern of mine. The use of the camera footage and when and how we would release that if people requested it, for example, because their bike was stolen, those types of things. And it's yet to be scoped out. So I would think along with that policy would probably come some information about what that directly translates into a dollar amount or staff time for council's consideration before they adopt it.
Mr. Baranowski.
Thank you to council. Our FOI expert is not with us this evening, and Mr. McConnell may know, may not. But there also are thresholds where, depending on the complexity of the request and the amount of time, we do set a cost to provide that and recuperate those costs. Because transparency does cost money, and either the taxpayer or the requester needs to fund that.
Mr. McConnell.
Since we're a little bit down this rabbit hole, we do have a reply, like our response is essentially that if it takes less than 3 hours of time for us to assemble, we don't send a bill for that. But before we start to do the work, we estimate the amount of time required. We send that information on to the requester, and we advise them of what is expected to potentially be their cost, and then have their commitment to recover that. But again, as you can tell, most FOIs will not necessarily take longer than the minimum. So when you add up a number of FOIs in 1 year that are all 3-hour time potentials without a cost recovery, then you're talking, if it's one a month, then it's 36 hours of unpaid time that we're not recovering. So that's kind of the thing that you'd be looking at.
Councillor Shoesmith and then Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. Have we approached Trinus at all about the surveillance and data storage and FOIs?
I don't have an answer for that, but maybe Director Burdick.
It hasn't been scoped into their scope of work yet. No. We have security cameras that have been operating, and then because of the lack of policy, identified that, turn them off. And then as soon as we have that policy and we have the backing infrastructure and we can bring them back into play, they get brought into play.
Thank you.
Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Worship. Just a note from history. We had a whole raft of this come to council 15 years ago, and when there was a bunch of graffiti and petty crime and so on going on in town. And this went around and round, and the cost to do data storage, access control, freedom of information, so on, it was such a ball of yarn at the time that council never ended up actually proceeding with it. So I look forward to what I'm hoping will be, with 15 years of time, much more affordable and approachable technological solutions to this. But also I feel like the freedom of information work that's been done, generally speaking, not here in council, but at the provincial and federal level, probably help guide us a lot better than what we had back in those days. So I'm a little bit more hopeful that we'll be able to get there with this, but it is a bit of a ball of yarn to get through for sure.
It really is. Councillor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just in the theme of looking at process improvements in the facility realm there, I'm just tying it back to citizen survey once again. If you remember from that graph that we had, the top was roads and sidewalks, and second on the list was events, I believe, like community events and
Events and
facilities,
animation,
if I recall it right. Where I'm going with this, Your Worship, is the real upside from having well done cultural events is invaluable. There's a couple of councillors here who know this better than I do.
Couldn't agree more.
Okay, where I'm going with this again is coming back to events like Canada Day. I think that needs to be a real showcase event in our community. And as you have experienced, you were an AV technician yourself, not a mayor at that event. There is an opportunity to up the game in that space. I feel like if more thought and planning goes into Canada Day celebration, that'll be well received in the community. And yeah, it's a feedback more than anything else here.
I look forward when my manager, Hill, brings forward a report to council on special events where we can share with council the special events that the department runs, and we can have a discussion on where resources should be allocated to which event.
Thank you, Mr. Lubin. Councillor Ramirez.
Not so much on the resources, Your Worship. I think it is adequately budgeted. Like all I'm saying is a lot more focus and intent on running a good show is what I'm getting at here.
Yeah, and I did want to say though that Manager Hill was caught unaware on the Canada Day event, but it was absolutely smooth on the September 30th event. Like certainly, learned from that experience or first experience with Canada Day and responded appropriately for the second event. So it was, just wanted to put that in there.
So the last remaining two policies there were brought forward to me with a bit of an inspection done by MIABC at my request on certain facilities. And it was at that time they recommended that the city develop a dangerous tree policy and a trail policy. It'll do a number of things. It'll make it fairly transparent to the public what we do and don't do, setting service levels and the expectation for trails and dangerous trees. And it will reduce the city's risk by clarifying what we do and don't do and when we do it. So I'm hoping those policies come through this year and can be put into action right away. And then also, we're always looking for opportunities for service and partnering agreements when they come available. And these are ways, to use the horsepower in the community to extend city services. So we're always looking for opportunities to do that. And then the very last slide, I'm hoping to have some color added by Mr. Bornowski, is the RMI. There are a number of projects that are already established in the resort development strategy. I have the privilege to work with the events and animation bucket of money, or there's about $70,000 per year. We take in applications from community partners, community groups for events or projects that will animate the community. So we're well on our way. I work with Tourism Fernie quite closely on evaluating those. And we used the entire amount last year and this year, and we've already got quite a few applications coming in. Also, a couple projects of note are the Annex Park electrical servicing. So this would be phase 2. Phase 1 was done last year, where we installed the power pole, the hydro power pole on the neighborhood side of the Annex Dike. So phase 2 will be bringing the power from that service into the park at a kiosk for events, and Wapiti is contributing some money towards that project. We also have in the budget a small events trailer that was suggested by the community partner group, as a matter of fact, about a way we could improve our the way we run events or provide the event rental equipment, because we have a varying degree of large events and small events. And we have a large event trailer that has room for big generators and big event rental equipment, but we have nothing that's smaller. So when there's a large event on one side of the town, our event rental equipment's being left outside or overnight, and it's pretty vulnerable to being stolen or vandalized. And then we also have the ODR building and outdoor washrooms. There was a project in the RDS for outdoor washrooms at the Aquatic Center property. If you remember, I touched on it briefly last year about investigating that option, and that was going to bring forward some different options. So interesting timing with the ODR building. We're yet to scope out the options to replace that building that the temporary use permit expires in the spring. So we are needing something to replace that building for infrastructure, for the water and the power. So look forward to bringing that forward to council to make some decisions on what that looks like. Also part of that, I was asked to point out that that will be part of, it'll basically be the first opportunity for staff to run through the service level exercise. Maybe someone else wants to elaborate on it.
Council has seen in, or council has set in their strategic plan, a level of service assessments overall, but then specifically there's a goal of advancing one or a small number of major service area analyses or assessments per year. And the outdoor rink is our natural starting point to pilot that. Mr. Logan, who's completing his asset management professional designation, has been advancing some service level assessments already to prepare, but essentially piloting what a comprehensive service area assessment would be, so that we can then have completed some public engagement, really define the true cost and the true outcomes of that service area, and support council in making a decision about the future of the outdoor rink.
How often was it open this year? And not to drill down on that.
It may have been open for a day or two in that cold snap. My staff's fairly upset with me because every time it's cold, I ask them to go out there and build ice, and they know the temperatures are just going to get warm the following week, and it's all for naught. So we are developing data and statistics that do not support running an outdoor rink this year specifically. We had a cold snap that was too cold. And I did not feel comfortable asking my staff to go in -30 and spray water on the rink. So we've been challenged by the weather this year for sure. Yeah. And I mean, we might get a few skating days. It's ready to go. We just need the weather to cooperate.
Yeah. No, fair enough. Thank you. Sorry, did you have a question? No. Councillor McIsaac.
I do, Your Worship. And when is going to be the appropriate time for council to have a discussion about the long-term viability of having the outdoor arena? When do we want to have that talk?
Well, I think when this service level review analysis of it comes to council.
Okay, excellent.
Our target council would be late spring, early summer, to enable us to then make a plan to do some construction to replace some infrastructure. But yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Smith. Okay, Councillor Ramirez.
Technically, you get to decide.
Well, he's being very, very kind.
Let's focus on one recreational facility at one time, Your Worship.
Councillor Smith.
Yeah, that's thank you, Mayor Milligan. That's going to be an unhappy set of discussions we have to have. I mean, it was a good thing and a nice stopgap. And I mean, I'm emotionally invested in it as the next guy, perhaps more. I helped put a lot of that together, but that's really hard to argue with math.
Yeah, yeah, and Councillor McIsaac had a graph the other evening or last evening about snowfall and snowpack and consequent temperatures, and it's just it's becoming a non-viable asset as time goes on. Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Worship. Unless, of course, we pour a whole bunch more money into it and make it a viable outdoor rink with an ice
Ice plant,
plant.
yeah. And a roof, yeah.
Well, and then walls.
Yeah. Sorry, Mr. Logan.
Well, that's it for me. Welcome to answer any more questions.
Other questions?
I might be kind of repeating here, Your Worship, but whatever we do with the outdoor rink, we just have to go lockstep with the community. It's just, there shouldn't be any, daylight between the decisions we'll be making with what the community wants. I really want to emphasize on that one.
Thank you. Councillor Nix.
Thank you, Worship. So just one part about the flag poles. Is that new flag poles in front of the city hall? Is that 3 there and then 3 at the chamber, or is it? I'm just curious.
Yeah, what I proposed in the budget was 3 flag poles at City Hall and 3 flag poles at the chamber. So there's 2 flag poles existing at the chamber and 1 flag pole that exists at City Hall.
Councillor Schussman.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. I wasn't planning on bringing this up, but just a question, seeing as we're here talking about it. Were we to retire the outdoor rink building, would there be any obstacle to us running the small outdoor rink like we used to have out by the courthouse? Is there any reason why we couldn't attempt that?
Through the chair, it's likely that through the service level review, there'd be some recommendations on different levels of service that could that we could tweak with the outdoor rink. In my opinion, there's a very high level of service right now. It's very uncommon for municipalities to have a second Zamboni to service their outdoor rink. It's very common to have a hose set up for the public to use and snow shovels. So there's a big gap in a small level of service to provide an outdoor rink for the community. And then, if weather conditions, you could play hockey games on it because it's that good. But when the weather doesn't cooperate, it's pretty hard to maintain. Long story short, there is a range of possibilities depending on what we want the service level to be.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to float it, get it out in the consciousness before the discussion.
Any other questions for Mr. Logan, Director Logan? Seeing none, thanks, sir. Can we take a 5-minute recess and people stretch their legs and get some more? Yes.
One recreation facility.
2 minutes.
Next year's gonna be. I'm actually excited. I think this might be an opportunity for us to reinvigorate.
Well,
maybe,
it was
maybe I know that you know there's a bunch of people are signing up for my hall. So yeah.
Can we reconvene, please? He wasn't sure it's his reading glasses. We're back on the air.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. Next is Fernie Fire and Emergency Services, which will be Mr. Boranowski.
Thank you very much, Mr. Burdett. I have a few slides that have been developed with some support from the department. Mr. Morgan, or Chief Morgan, is away this evening. If we go to the first one, we're going to talk about emergency management, and then separately next we will speak to fire preparedness and response. But first on emergency management, in terms of highlights for this service area, and I'm not going to touch on fire hall because Mr. Heisler has already spoken about that, and I think you're aware of the progress on that project. Specifically, currently, a lot of effort will be going forward on collaborating with the Regional District of the East Kootenays and our neighbors on emergency management initiatives related to new legislation. We have a grant application in for the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund for Emergency Support Services. That's the ESS trailer. That application is in. It was just recently discussed. And we have or are seeking the receipt of a letter related to funding specific to Indigenous engagement for emergency and disaster management. And that will be for all municipalities and regional districts to engage with Indigenous communities to develop emergency response plans. We will be working together with the RDEK and our neighboring munis on how we strategically can pool those funds to the best benefit. We don't have a clear answer on exactly what the strategy is, nor do we know exactly how much we're receiving, but we will soon. But that money is likely to be pooled to establish positions to then facilitate on behalf of multiple municipalities with Indigenous communities so that we're not all duplicating efforts in overwhelming resource-strapped organizations. Separately, there is a lot of work being initiated with the Emergency Management Committee and the Regional District and other munis to adapt to the new emergency management legislation. And the one call out that Mr. Burdett may mention as well, however, not in great detail, is Next Generation 911. This is primarily an exercise in improving our data and how we provide it as partners through to the 911 service, but we don't have a lot of clarity. The RD and each municipality have received the exact same amount of funding. We will get clarity over time on what that means, and then we'll be working together in collaboration with the RDEK to make that happen. And that's to prepare us for the next generation of 911 services for all our communities as they're being transformed. Next, if we can go to fire preparedness and response. Primarily here we have highlighted grant-funded initiatives. That's because in terms of the operating budget, we have really three main high-level areas, and that's personal protective equipment, education and training, and the related staffing costs for salaries and contracts, and then the vehicle and firefighting equipment maintenance and repair. And so it's generally steady. There's not any new major significant changes in those, but specific to preparedness and response where we have had new initiatives. We have the UBCM grant under the CEPF for volunteer and composite fire departments. That's $30,000 that was submitted and received for equipment, including turnout gear, decontamination of said gear, or turnout gear to replace old gear, fire hoods for firefighters, spare gloves, etc., and then some training courses and education. We are wrapping up a CBT, or Columbia Basin Trust funded wildfire mitigation project from 2023 for the Ridgemont lands. So we'll see a little bit of cost adjustment as that work wraps up and reporting is submitted to the province. There's still some reporting requirements. And then finally, the Fire Smart program. We have $160,000 total to advance this program. That provides for about 400 hours for our Fire Smart coordinator, who is also our deputy chief. And then advancing the points here on the slide, which are community wildfire resiliency planning, the neighborhood program, structural protection equipment, and then it also supports some OCP updates to ensure that Fire Smart principles can be integrated in our official community plans. There's I believe, $10,000 earmarked to support the OCP project to supplement the funding that the planning department has set aside through finance to ensure that there's some capacity for policy language development in the OCP around Fire Smart. Then there's training for response and emergency management overall and some educational material.
Sorry, Mr. Baranowski, Councillor McIsaac, and then Councillor Ramirez.
Thank you, Worship. Just a question, and I won't be surprised if Mr. Baranowski cannot answer this, but I'm just wondering with regards to the wildfire risk management work that's been going on through CBT, fire interface management isn't obviously a one and done thing because it's ongoing. And I'm just wondering if there's been any feedback coming back from CBT, whether or not this program is going to be reinitiated following the reports, or if it will come back again in the future. And I'm wondering if we've had any communication on that.
We'll get that answer and bring it back.
Thank you.
Councillor Ramirez.
Thank you, Worship. Is there a slide on operating expenses for the fire department at all?
Not specifically, but we could turn to that page in Mr. Burdett's in the workbook or in a spreadsheet if there are questions and need discussion.
Your Worship, I'm just want to have an honest conversation about fire. Sure, this is not sustainable, right? Like the trajectory here is $2 million and going up and up. And I know it's a big portion of it is wages. Is there any thought around any kind of cost control in this department at all? I know I'm not, got to be careful with this question, but I'm not suggesting that we are not supportive of this service. This is super important for our community safety, but can we go in this trajectory for years and years where, it's outpacing inflation almost?
Through to council, we have had discussions on what our capacity to sustain any additional growth in staffing levels of career firefighters or of exempt staff in the department are, given our population and given our needs. And certainly that was one of the challenges, or not challenges, but that was one of the realities of moving to the two on the floor rotational shift model, and now implementing the new change to all calls for alarms, trying to bring back down some of the overtime related to that work, is a cost control method. There are some other response and service level decisions we can make that may reduce overtime. However, a lot of what's committed there is within a contract, and a contract that has a staffing level enshrined. And so the minimum staffing level, this current staffing level is set within that collective bargaining agreement with the IFF local. And so you don't have a really strong lever that isn't extremely drastic to pull in terms of that, other than control moving forward and operating models that leverage a composite department or a mixed department that includes auxiliary or paid on call or volunteer firefighters with career in terms of its overall response.
Mr. Burdett.
Thank you. And also just to remind council of the discussion we had with Chief Morgan a month ago about the fire underwriter survey rating. If any reduction in service level from the fire department would affect that rating, and then the average citizen in Fernie is going to pay for it anyway with increased home insurance premiums and all that.
I mean, I appreciate that, Your Worship. Like that was the main argument in our fire hall discussion. It's just this. The trajectory is where I don't even know whether we have any solutions for this, but is this sustainable? I feel like we need to have some kind of an in-depth conversation around this at some point. Is it during the budget session or somewhere else? I don't know. I'm just seeking some ideas here.
Yeah, well, I suspect if we're in any circumstance talking about operating costs, this is the place to have that conversation. I am loath to break a collective agreement. Right, so we need to look at, as Mr. Bonowski has suggested, cost containment within our current operating model. And I think actually Chief Morgan has touched on this, opportunities to bring in firefighters in training and deploy them in our department, whether that's through an educational institution or other circumstance that takes some of the pressure off our auxiliary costs and things like that. There are opportunities to investigate, but I think we'd also need the chief here to have that conversation with more clarity and depth, I would think. Councillor Shoesmith?
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. Just speaking up a little bit in support of Councillor Ramirez. It's a good question to ask. It's a discussion we should have, as it's one of our biggest items in the budget. I kind of look forward to digging into this in a fulsome manner at some point in the future. I mean, that is an issue, that is a problem, but I think there's a lot of solutions at hand that maybe we can come up with. And I think Chief Morgan is aware of some ways we can work on that.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Worship. I suspect we're not alone in having this conversation. Province-wide, the conversation about the cost of protective services in municipalities is high. Most municipalities are averaging around 25% of the municipal budget is just on protective services. So I won't be surprised if this becomes a larger conversation at UBCM, for example. It has risen in the past, and I'm sure it will come up again. And hopefully we're going to see some more general solutions that we can all apply. Although not to discount any locally made ones, but I do think that this is a big conversation that's happening provincially.
Yeah, thank you. Other comments? Seeing none, are you okay?
As an action, do we have Chief Morgan at the next budget meeting? Is that could we take that as an action? Or
I don't know his availability.
He will not be here tomorrow night, council, although he can be back on the day when we bring back feedback from the open house based on your direction tomorrow and can discuss this.
Right.
I would probably recommend, if you're thinking of implementing significant changes to fire protection as a service area, that's going to be an extended discussion. So you may want to consider, especially if it's the major expense here is going to be staffing levels. You're going to want, I think, a series of discussions to advance that over time.
I'm out of ammunition here, Your Worship. I don't know what I want. It's just that this chunk needs more detailed discussion of some sort.
I suspect that's fair. Yeah, Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Worship. I would suggest that it's unlikely that we're going to make significant changes to fire protection services in this year. And although certainly happy to have Chief Morgan available for any conversation, this feels more like, to speak to Councillor Ramirez's original point, a trajectory problem. And so rather than being a specific budget discussion for this week or next week or whatever, this feels like a discussion that we should be having later on in the year, and perhaps every year, looking at what the trajectory issues are. And let's look at it as a long-term problem with long-term solutions as opposed to, let's get the chief in here next week and.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I feel like the time pressure of the current budget cycle will would potentially derail a conversation, or it wouldn't be as fulsome and as detailed as we'd like. To both your points about it being a trajectory issue. But I'm, I appreciate you asking the question, because I think absolutely, not unlike the outdoor rink, there shouldn't be any sacred cows. We should look at everything as we can, but we need the tools and the time to have the right conversation. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. As we're talking about trajectory and we're talking more fulsomely about protective services, I think we need to also make sure that we consider in this discussion the RCMP and potential future funding obligations and detachment increase size based on population growth, et cetera, et cetera. So I agree that this is certainly a conversation that needs to be had, but to try and shoehorn it into this budget cycle is probably not the best use of anybody's time at this point or this juncture, and rather look at it as a future direction. And what does our service level as a community, what do we feel is the appropriate service level?
Other comments, thoughts? Councillor Roddy Kelly.
Just was thinking about what Councillor McIsaac was saying, and would this be something we would want to maybe talk to other communities about at AKBLG? Like you mentioned, on average, 25% of municipal budgets in the province. Is it something we'd want to raise with our area association to take to the province for solutions?
Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Worship. I think it's a great starting point for that discussion. I will say that discussion is already happening. We need to join it and hear what's happening in the solutions. And it's been happening at UBCM as well. Like I said, this is a province-wide issue with the cost of protective services. Everybody wants them, but the cost of them is challenging. But yeah, I would support, like, let's see if we can, I was going to use the phrase circle the wagons, but that is absolutely not the expression that I wanted to use there. Look for partnerships and opportunities and solutions, I guess.
Councillor Ramirez.
Where I struggle here, Your Worship, is a scaling issue also, right? Like when we are talking about outdoor rink, $28,000-$30,000 budget line item, and we'll spend a lot of time thinking about service level and all those things. Whereas here you're looking at a 3 times or 10,000 times bigger outlay. And
you missed the point of the analogy.
No.
All I said was there should be no sacred cows. We should look into every service area.
Well, I'm not pointing towards the statement you made. Like, I'm just saying in general, like the actions that we took away during the session, for example, had outdoor arena, right? And it would be, I don't know, a month-long discussion or whatever it might take for a $30,000 line item.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's
it's
for something like this,
larger scale.
Yeah, this is much larger scale, and I appreciate it's large portion of it is driven by wages, and you can't really change the collective agreement. But to walk away from this sessions saying, it's a provincial problem, we might need some in-depth discussion at a later date. It just does not feel like action oriented for me, with specific timeline of at least, are we looking at 2 or 3 things that we can tackle this year that can meaningfully, move the trajectory in the opposite direction. Like,
which goes back to the earlier comment about having Chief Morgan here to provide some clarity.
Yeah.
As to what those things might be. Councillor Shoesmith.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. There's 2 sides to that number. I mean, there's expense and there's also income, and to some extent, maybe we could look to sort of like what Creston's got going on within their service area, where everybody that enjoys protection is paying the same for the protection they enjoy. That I think would be a significant change and is something we should be paying some attention to at a later time.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair comment. And I think that agreement is up for negotiation, if not this year, then next year. Is that right with the regional district?
Thanks. I believe it expires end of 2025.
End of 2025?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. It strikes me that that's a significant portion of what it is that we're paying for.
Mhm. Yeah,
And-
that's fair.
Yeah,
yeah.
thank you.
Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Worship. Just going back to what Director Burdett said about the fire underwriter survey. I mean, if you think about some of the homes up in the ski resort are now paying an extra $1,500 for insurance because they're outside of that 8-minute response time. Times that by, like, if we reduce the size of our fire department, just doing quick math from your head, $1,500, let's say reduce it, we get to class C or whatever it is. 1,500 times 2,300 homes is $3.45 million. That's going to be increased from our insurance rates in town because we have a reduced service. So we pay for our fire department or we pay more insurance. It's up to us.
Councillor Shoesmith.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. I don't think anybody's really advocating cutting staffing levels, just to be clear. I think it's just that, as Councillor McIsaac said, this is a trajectory issue.
So I'll look to Mr. Burdett and Mr. Baranowski and get any thoughts you may have on at least advancing this discussion during our current budget cycle.
Certainly when Chief Morgan returns, he's able to speak in detail about some of the operational initiatives that are designed to contain costs. I would point specifically to items like the grant applications for UBCM, which have typically been for volunteer fire departments, where he's now through Deputy Chief Robinson been able to engage directly with UBCM and free those up where they're starting to be awarded to composite departments like ourselves. We're benefiting to the tune of about $30,000 in equipment and training budget that we would normally be, if we were being responsible, funding from and providing it, still funding it from taxation. Additionally, I think it's revenues like the Fire Smart program that provide that 400 hours for a Fire Smart coordinator, offsetting the cost of one of our direct employees that will make the difference over time. There has been and Bryn can do the math on the percentage increase over time, but that trajectory has really, I think, mirrored some of the enhancements that we've brought in, such as advancing Fire Smart and securing someone who then is able to secure those grant funds that advance regional emergency social services, RDEK grants to improve EOCs. That collaboration wouldn't happen without a deputy chief who knew emergency management and grant management really well. But I do recognize it is a significant outlay for the community to have a composite that includes a significant career component fire department. For a community of our size, we do provide a high-end service and are a destination with significantly more people to protect than we have homes to fund that protection or properties to fund that protection from.
Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Worship. I'm just wondering if we want to get to a place where that I think is where Councillor Ramadas wants to get to, which is we're going to do X at Y time. It might be useful taking a cue from Councillor Adia Kelly's mention about the AKBLG, is if we're going to, at AKBLG, have a few discussions, and we could schedule a meeting following AKBLG with perhaps the chief and or deputy chief and go through some of the discussions that we've had, hear some of the more nuanced discussions about what is actually happening at the fire hall, because that's an extensive discussion. As Mr. Baranowski has just brought up a whole pile of things that I'll bet very few of us have a good understanding of. So that might be a good like starting timeline to get in that, as opposed to diving in and starting to potentially try to make changes to the budget.
Yeah, and I'm not even suggesting would make changes to the budget, just to have the chief here to provide that level of clarity, and you know, you've done an admirable job, Mr. Barnowski, but he's much closer to the work than you are, and could at least provide us a bit of a framework of how he's looking at it in terms of his own cost containment initiatives, just to provide us, you know, a sense of his vision. And then, you know, to your point, that's an additive conversation, absolutely, that we can bring back when we've had those further conversations.
Completely fair, Your Worship. And I think we're two sides of the problem here, right? One is, what do we know now and what are we deciding on now versus what is that trajectory, discussion, and long-term view? So,
yeah, I think that's right. Yeah. Does that seem satisfactory to you, Councillor?
Absolutely, Your Worship.
Yeah.
Bend the curve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that where we can, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah. Mr. Barnowski.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have one final comment for council. There is the level of service project, which is taking stock of our service areas, of which Fernie Fire and Emergency Services is one. The staffing levels, the infrastructure, the policy language, and the master plans that guide what we said we would provide versus what we currently do provide. And that will enable that conversation over the long term. But that is a project for this coming year, is to not consolidate, but to do a stock taking of all of our service areas and to complete that assessment so that we have a more solid starting point to have really well informed discussions moving forward.
Thank you. Anything further on fire and fire preparedness and response? Seeing nothing. Are you done those slides, Mr. Barnowski? Okay. Director Lennox.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. I got three capital projects that I'm going to touch on, and also brief council on the proposed 0.5 FTE planner position, and then outline the other planning and bylaw enforcement projects that we're going to be working on. So the first capital project is the housing needs report. It's a legislative provincial requirement to complete this report by January 1st, 2025. Budget is 50,000. It is directly in alignment with the goals and the objectives listed under livable community, particularly housing and childcare, housing diversity, which is a big issue in town, and of course affordability. The housing needs report would look at current and future housing needs within the community. It would identify existing and projected gaps in housing supply by collecting and analyzing quantitative and qualitative information about local demographics, economics, housing stock, and other factors. And there could be a housing strategy or action plan as an outgrowth of this. But in terms of how it would link with the OCP, it would be a foundational background report for the OCP. So I would anticipate that the recommendations in this housing needs report would be embedded as policies within the OCP itself in a chapter pertaining to housing. So it's from that perspective, it's an important report. So speaking of the OCP, again, another legislative provincial requirement has to be done by December 31st, 2025. The budget for this year is 25,000. And in 2025, it's 150,000. Basically hits all the objectives and goals in the council strategic plan. It's obviously important that it's updated to address our evolving social, cultural, and economic and environmental conditions. It's an important document in terms of providing council with public engagement. That would be the first component of the OCP update. So they getting a pulse on the community vision would be sort of the first and foremost component of the 2024 part of this project.
Councillor Ramadez, sorry, Director Lennox.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just wondering, when will the bids go out for OCP, like as to who will run this?
Sorry, what was the question?
Well, when will the bids go out?
The RFP timing.
The RFP and
Yeah, the RFP would be, we're anticipating to have it out by the end of March. Yeah. So we have a foundation done for the RFP. We have a committee set up that's looking at other RFPs that have been sent out recently, and we expect to get it out by the end of March.
Sorry, Director Lennox, in terms of sort of a related, well, maybe not related to the OCP, of course, are we anticipating, so the public engagement thread, of course, throughout the OCP development, but then an implementation committee that continues beyond the completion of the OCP? And because I know there's been observations in the past that the OCP, that the implementation committee didn't continue, and as such, this is not a judgment, it's just what's been said, the OCP wasn't as effective as it could have been because it didn't have that continuing thread of community involvement.
Yeah, in terms of some background on that, the implementation committee, you're correct, didn't continue on for an extended period of time. It kind of evolved into the livability report committee, the quality of life index committee.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the historical background on that. But I would expect that with the OCP preparation, that there be some implementation tables that were similar to what was done in the 14 OCP that would outline the long range, mid range, and short range implementation projects. And that an implementation committee could be established to ensure that there's some monitoring and oversight to ensure that those are carried forward and prioritized in processes such as this, as the budget process.
Thank you. Yeah, because I do think that's important to keep that sort of connective tissue, if you will, with the community in terms of its implementation throughout. Thank you.
Next slide. So the development permit, and I also want to emphasize this would be building permit intake and tracking software project. This was a major recommendation of our development approvals review report, the so-called LIGADIP process that was the grant funded by UBCM. This would enhance application intake process by improving efficiencies and transparencies. The applicants would be able to track their permits throughout the process, which I know has been a concern raised by contractors and developers not knowing where their permit was in the process. So the project the budget would be 50,000. We're intending to hire a consultant to do an RFP to identify the software provider, and that the 50 grand would also go towards purchasing that software. So that's a long time coming for us, and we're hoping that it will significantly reduce our building permit review times in particular. But it also, we're looking to have it be applicable to our development permit processes as well, like our forming character and hazard lands development permits. So it would be hopefully all encompassing for all our permit issuances.
Sorry, Mr. Lennox. So it says it's characterized as development permit intake. So is that an online permitting tool?
Yeah, that's correct. So it would be the whole process for submitting a building permit or a development permit would be done online.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you.
Next slide. So the 0.5 FTE planner position, this would be added to increase capacity to address the local government housing initiative requirements. So as I mentioned, that relates to the updating the OCP which is a requirement, the housing needs report, which is also another legislative requirement, but just as importantly, the updating the zoning bylaw to enable small-scale multi-unit housing. We've initiated that process already. We're working with the manager of planning on that initiative. We developed a table with the new regulations that would enable 4 dwelling units on a 60 by 120 lot. So that's quite a major shift there in the way we do development in BC in particular. So just to give you an idea of the scale of what that could look like, I would recommend that council take a look at the triplex under construction on Riverside Way. That probably is a couple of meters higher than we would recommend in our new set of regulations, but it gives you a really good idea about the scale and mass of development that is coming down the pipe potentially here. I haven't heard a lot of inquiries from members of the public. I've only had really 2 that are eagerly anticipating this happening. That one guy in particular has a lot in the vacant lot in the annex that he's interested in doing a 4-plex. And so he's waiting for these regulations to come into place here. So in terms of,
sorry, Director, do we have a communications plan when we have, or will we have a communications plan developed when we have all these new regulations in place to help our community understand what they mean?
Yeah, in terms of our way we're going to approach this, we're going to have a draft set of regulations, and we're going to bring that to council in a committee of the whole meeting, hopefully March, April. And just to give a community, a heads up in terms of what to anticipate. And we're going to have the planner who's got the architectural background do some isometric drawings to give an indication of the mass and scale in sort of a 2D perspective on what, say, for example, a 50% site coverage would look like for a 4-plex, and just to give everybody a good idea of what to anticipate once we have an example that actually comes out of the ground in reality. So to answer your question, yes, we would have a communications policy for sure on this.
Thank you. Yeah. Councilor Ramirez.
Thanks, Your Worship. I got confused between this job position and project manager. The project manager is not in your department, is it? Sorry, I thought I saw it, but I missed it. I don't know.
Through to council, you'll have seen a project manager in the capital slides for probably roads and a number of other places. Those are the capitalized funding elements for our engineering project manager, Ms. Line, as her role is in between capital projects and some operating projects. So that's existing position. No.
So
sorry, Councilor Artie Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. I just wanted to clarify with Director Lennox, just so I'm understanding, a lot of the changes that are coming down for density are coming directed by the province, correct?
That's correct, yes.
So just so the public understands that those are going to be the drivers too that our city will face.
Yeah, the enactment of Bill 44.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of the budget, it's approximately 49,000 annually. In terms of funding, it would be not from taxation. Speaking of the province, we received $176,000 capacity funding to implement these initiatives. So we would tap into that over 2 years. The key with that, though, is that they have to, the planner would have to be working on projects that are eligible under that program. So those 3 are the only ones that would be pertain to that situation. So in terms of other sources of funding, we're looking at, and we've initiated this, and again, it's been a long time coming, but looking at increasing fees through updating our development application fees bylaw, which is a 2005 bylaw. And that's a strategic recommendation from the development approvals review report in a major one. And also with the citizen satisfaction survey, pardon me, better permit times is obviously, from what I gathered from that, was a key item of concern with the public. So having this planner would be a key driver in improving satisfaction in that regard, for sure. So next slide. So in terms of other planning projects, I've touched on the legislative provincial requirement to have the small scale multi-unit. So you'll be, the public will be seeing that acronym quite a bit, the SSMU. Housing defined by bylaw, that's got to be done by June 2024 or June 30th, 2024. The development approvals review report strategic recommendations implementation. There's 7 specific strategic recommendations there that planning manager is going to work on those once he and I have finished the small scale multi-unit zoning regulation amendments. The development application fees bylaw review and update, we've initiated that. So we've reached out to, or we've obtained the applicable bylaws from a number of 10 municipalities, and most of them from the resort municipality initiative grouping. We've done a comparative table, and so to see where we fit in with the other municipalities. But the other side of the equation is that we're also looking at how much time we spend on these applications. So the Director of Operations has provided data on how much the acting engineering manager has spent on a few major projects. And just that person alone has exceeded what we charge, for example, this one Bearland Strata that we worked on. So that doesn't even factor in planning staff time in that review. So we're looking at, the cost recovery model potentially with that project, and that a blueprint for that is outlined in the report that McElhaney did for us. But I want to identify other municipalities that have approached this, the cost recovery model, to see how they did it and take it from there.
Councillor Hamilton.
If I may, through your worship, with the cost recovery model and kind of the staff time involved with some of these developments and such, is it, and this is my ignorance in the development process, but is it a cost that has been put onto the city that a developer could potentially be doing in-house themselves, other like the work that the city staff are doing from the development side? Is that something that a private entity could hire privately, or is that more of a part of our municipality? These are the things that we need to do anyways.
Yeah, I've looked at through to Councillor Hamilton, the report that McElhaney did for us did make a recommendation that we could look at graduated, if that's the right word, type of review models, where a developer would pay more to have a major development expedited. So that's, I don't think that's something that we would look at right now, but that is something that could be looked at in the future, that they would pay more in order to have expedited review process. And that may entail hiring outside consultants to help us out in that regard.
Mr. Baranowski.
There are some municipalities who completely outsource their development application review. whether it be a planning or partially a planning component or an engineering component, or partner with another municipality or a regional district on the building inspections. And there are different models for that. Some of them are currently operating under bylaws where you submit an application, and once it's complete, you get a quote on that review, pay a deposit, and then you fully pay for that external review. So there's elimination of cost to the taxpayer, although they are not, those that we have found yet that are approaching it that way are not at our scope and scale and pace of development. And so it's a bit of a different challenge to figure out what would work here.
Okay, last bullet there, planning resources have been dedicated, as council knows, to the housing and childcare pilot project, which is next to the old fast gas site. And could also probably add that we've been involved with the fire hall project as well. Next slide. We're fortunate that we have a very capable bylaw enforcement staff that are able to tackle these types of projects. So the first one is the review of the current STR regulation, enforcement and fees. That's been undertaken by bylaw officer Kramer. So basically that's a debrief of how our regulatory framework is working in regard to STRs. He's going to bring a report to council in the March committee of the whole meeting. I can say with some certainty that fees will be raised for the STR, the two types of STR licenses we have. The type for condo hotels, as well as the principal residence type of typical STR. So fees will be raised. He's looked at other municipalities throughout the region, and we're right at the bottom. So he can fully expect to see that recommendation that fees for those two types of SDRs will be raised significantly. And then also there's initiative with the province. They've have their own set of regulations now, and there's going to be a recommendation to opt into their regulatory framework as well. So there's some benefits that there's no charge to that. And so we would have access to the provincial registry and their enforcement team. So that's a win for the city there. The waste management bylaw, we talked about that last night. So I was thinking we could link up the bylaw officers and engineer line on the updates to that bylaw. They're taking the approach in that regard to that bylaw of mitigating, I guess they called it vector or wildlife attractants, and then looking at ways to properly store the garbage receptacles. So those are two big issues that they want to tackle in regard to that. The next two are council is familiar with the amendments to the animal responsibility bylaw, backyard hens, and the cat bylaw that's on the record. First of all, the backyard hens, we got to do some zoning bylaw amendments. It's only got first reading, so we got to do those first and bring those in tandem with the bylaw to or the amendments to the animal responsibility to deal with hens. The cat bylaw, council may recall that you guys did give direction to the bylaw officers to bring some amendments to the animal responsibility to deal with particularly feral cats in the community. Single-use plastics, we need to do communication strategies. That's still at first reading. So got to get on that. And then in terms of the theme of raising fees, we're going to be reviewing the business license and regulation bylaw and look at raising fees there. And then finally, we're going to be assisting the engineering public works in the development of their water conservation bylaws. So there's going to be quite a bit of work for the bylaw officers in the next year, given that list.
Thank you, Director Lennox. And recognizing that we have 6 minutes left, if there are burning questions from council, Councilor Ramirez.
I just want to know more about the COVID restart
Money.
money there. I don't know if you guys have actually answered this question in the previous sessions, but okay,
No.
thank you.
Shall we put that on the agenda for tomorrow night?
Absolutely, Your Worship, and to council, the COVID restart funds are funds that were for recovery and return to full operating capacity. We've largely done that without the use of those funds. There's a number of eligible uses, and that is one of council's levers. Those are one-time funds. They don't get replenished, but they are an opportunity to soften a blow or reduce the taxation impact temporarily based on what they can be used for, and that can be drilled into at tomorrow's drill down meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Audie Kelly.
One tiny little question, I hope. Director Lennox, do you think we'll be successful finding someone for a half-time FTE given the cost of living here?
And the shortage of planners provincially and nationally?
Yeah, that was an issue when we tried to fill the planner position. So yeah, we're well aware that there's a shortage of planners, but I think we have a strategy in place to address it.
Excellent. Director Burdett.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. I'd like to do a quick mental health check. As you said, it's 9:57. Mr. McConnell has 3 slides, and then Ms. Rhodes has 1 slide, and I have 2 slides. And then I've got the spreadsheets I said I would bring regarding investing of funds, and also a quick service adjustment and the effect on tax rate. And then we do still have some levers to explore using those tools. And so that's what's left. And I just wanted to bring that up and see how council's feeling, given that it's almost 10. And
yeah, my preference is to do it tomorrow night. Others? Yeah, we don't want to get in the circumstance of making poor decisions because we're tired.
Great.
But thank you for that. Unless I see any objections, which I don't.
The beauty is you need a motion to go past 10 o'clock.
Right, but I can just adjourn
Yeah.
this meeting now.
Good.
And let's call it adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Great conversation, and appreciate everybody's